Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Black Magic. We are thrilled to present today's story. What if Harry accidentally destroyed the Dursley house at age 4 and the Ministry declared him the most dangerous wizard alive? If these stories bring joy to your day, please consider liking and subscribing. Every bit of support helps us continue this passion project. Now, prepare yourself for an amazing tale. Chapter 1, The explosion. Thunder crashed above Privet Drive, rattling windows and setting off car alarms. Most residents of the painfully ordinary neighborhood had retreated inside their homes, doors locked against the sudden summer storm. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the pristine lawns and identical houses. Inside number 4, a small boy huddled in the darkness of his cupboard under the stairs. 4-year-old Harry Potter pressed his hands against his ears, trying to block out the thunder. His heart hammered in his chest as another boom shook the house. Through the slats in the cupboard door, he could see flashes of lightning casting strange shadows on the wall. "Stop your whimpering in there." Uncle Vernon's voice boomed almost as loud as the thunder. "Normal boys aren't afraid of a little storm." Harry bit his lip, trying to stay quiet. Uncle Vernon had locked him in after Harry had somehow turned Dudley's birthday cake blue. Harry didn't know how it happened, things just did around him sometimes. Aunt Petunia had screamed about freakishness before Vernon had grabbed him by the collar and thrown him into the cupboard. Another lightning strike hit somewhere nearby, close enough that the house shook. Harry heard Dudley wailing upstairs. "It's all right, Duddekins," Aunt Petunia cooed. "Mummy's here." Harry pulled his knees tighter to his chest. Nobody was here for him. Nobody ever was. The storm intensified. Rain lashed against the windows like someone throwing handfuls of pebbles. The wind howled through the cracks around the front door. And inside little Harry Potter, something began to build. It started as a warm feeling in his stomach. Different from the fear. More like when you stand too close to the fireplace. But then it grew, spreading through his chest, down his arms, into his fingertips. The sensation wasn't painful, it felt like being filled with sunlight. "Make it stop," Harry whispered, not knowing what it was. The warmth intensified, and he began to glow slightly in the darkness of the cupboard. "Please stop." Upstairs, Dudley's television switched itself on, then off. The lights in the kitchen began to flicker. "Bloody power lines," Vernon grumbled from the living room. "Petunia, get the torches ready." But this had nothing to do with power lines. The energy building inside Harry had reached his skin now. His fingertips sparked with tiny blue-white embers of magic. Fear gripped him. This was exactly the sort of thing that got him punished. "No, no, no," he pleaded with his own body. The door to the cupboard began to rattle. The small lock on the outside vibrated, then melted completely. Pictures fell from walls. Glasses shattered in cabinets. "What the devil?" Vernon appeared in the hallway, his face purple with rage when he saw the cupboard door swinging open. "Boy! What are you doing?" Harry looked up at his uncle, tears streaming down his face. "I can't stop it," he whimpered. That's when Vernon Dursley saw it. The boy was glowing, actually glowing with a strange blue-white light. His eyes were practically luminous, like a cat's caught in headlights. "Petunia!" Vernon bellowed, backing away. "It's happening again." The freakishness. Harry felt the warmth turn hot, then scorching. The air around him began to waver like pavement on a summer day. "Get away from me," Harry begged, not wanting to hurt anyone despite everything. "Please, I don't know what's happening." Petunia appeared at the top of the stairs, clutching Dudley who was still blubbering about the storm. Her eyes widened in horror when she saw Harry. "Vernon, get away from him," she shrieked. "It's just like what my sister used to do, only worse." The wood of the cupboard began to blacken and curl around Harry. The floorboards under his feet started to crack. The entire house seemed to groan as if under enormous pressure. Vernon lunged forward, determined to stop whatever was happening. I will not have this in my house. The moment his hand touched Harry's shoulder, everything exploded. Later, witnesses would describe it differently. Some said it was like a bomb going off. Others swore they saw strange lights shooting into the sky. A few claimed the entire house simply collapsed in on itself before blowing outward. What actually happened was much stranger. Harry Potter, small and frightened, released more accidental magic in a single burst than most adult wizards channel in their lifetime. The magical core of a wizard his age shouldn't have been capable of it, but Harry was no ordinary wizard. The magic expanded outward from his small body in a perfect sphere of devastating force. The cupboard disintegrated. The stairs collapsed. Walls blew outward. Windows shattered, sending glass shards flying across pristinely manicured lawns. The roof lifted completely off the house before crashing down again. And at the center of it all was Harry, suspended momentarily in mid-air, surrounded by a cocoon of wild magic before he collapsed onto what remained of the living room floor, unconscious. Miles away in London, instruments in the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes began screaming. Alarms that hadn't been triggered in decades blared throughout the ministry. The detection needle on the magical surge quantifier bent completely backward before snapping off. Millicent Bagnold, Minister for Magic, was enjoying a late dinner when her fireplace erupted in green flames. The head of a panicked-looking wizard appeared. Minister. Emergency. Unprecedented magical surge in Surrey. Muggle area. Bagnold dropped her fork. How bad? Off the scales, ma'am. The detectors are broken. We've got reports of visible magical phenomena observed by at least 30 Muggles so far. Obliviators? Already dispatched, but what? Ma'am, this wasn't an adult wizard. Our preliminary readings suggest it was a child. A very young child. Bagnold's blood ran cold. Who? Address is registered to a Muggle family named Dursley, but, the minister closed her eyes. Harry Potter lives there. The wizard in the fireplace looked stunned. How did you know? Send everyone. Magical law enforcement, healers, unspeakables. And contact Dumbledore immediately. She grabbed her cloak. I'm coming myself. Albus Dumbledore felt the wards around number 4 collapse like someone had punched him in the stomach. He'd been in his office reviewing student applications when the pain hit. The blood wards tied to Lily Potter's sacrifice were connected to him as their caster, and now they were simply gone. He stood so quickly his chair tipped backward. Harry, he whispered. Fawkes shrieked in alarm, rising from his perch as Dumbledore grabbed a handful of Floo powder. Ministry of Magic, he commanded, stepping into the green flames. He emerged into chaos. Wizards and witches ran in every direction. Alarms still blared. Through the mayhem, he spotted Bartemius Crouch Sr. barking orders to a group of Aurors. Barty! Dumbledore called, striding toward him. Crouch turned, his face grim. Dumbledore. I assume you felt it. Where is he? Is Harry safe? We don't know yet. Teams just arrived on scene. Crouch's voice was clipped, professional. The magical discharge was unprecedented. Biggest since you-know-who's fall. A silver lynx Patronus bounded into the room, stopping before them. It spoke in Kingsley Shacklebolt's deep voice, house destroyed. Muggle family injured but alive. The boy is intact, unconscious but stable. Magic still active in the area. Muggles gathering. Need additional obliviators. I'm going there, Dumbledore said, not a request but a statement of fact. Crouch nodded curtly. I'm coming with you. Minister Bagnold is already on her way. The scene that greeted them in Little Whinging was something out of a war zone. Where number 4 Privet Drive had once stood was now a smoking crater. Debris was scattered across 3 neighboring properties. The houses on either side had partially collapsed, their facing walls completely blown away. Water from broken pipes sprayed into the air, creating an eerie mist that reflected the emergency vehicle lights. Muggle police and firefighters were being systematically confronted by Ministry obliviators, directed to focus on evacuating neighbors rather than approaching the epicenter. Ministry wizards had established a perimeter, casting notice-me-not charms and Muggle-repelling wards. In the middle of what had been the Dursley living room, a circle of unspeakables surrounded a small form. Harry Potter lay unconscious on a conjured stretcher, still faintly glowing with residual magic. Around him, small objects, splinters of wood, bits of metal, even dust, orbited slowly like a miniature solar system. "Don't touch him directly," warned an unspeakable as Dumbledore approached. "His magical field is still active." Healer Jenkins tried and got thrown 20 feet. Dumbledore knelt beside the stretcher, just outside the orbit of debris. "Harry," he said softly. As if responding to his voice, the boy's eyelids fluttered, and the orbiting objects fell to the ground. The glow around him dimmed slightly. "Is he stable enough to transport?" Dumbledore asked. The lead unspeakable nodded. "We believe so, but where?" "Hogwarts," Dumbledore said firmly. "The hospital wing is equipped for magical surges, and Madame Pomfrey has experience with accidental magic injuries." "Absolutely not," came a sharp voice. Minister Bagnold had arrived, accompanied by a team of senior officials. "We need him at St. Mungo's where he can be properly contained and examined." Dumbledore stood, drawing himself up to his full height. "Millicent, this is a frightened child who has experienced severe magical trauma. He needs care, not containment. This child just obliterated an entire house and damaged half a dozen others." Barty Crouch Sr. interjected, gesturing at the destruction around them. "We have 3 Muggles injured, over 30 witnesses to manage, and magical residue that our team says will take weeks to fully disperse. All the more reason to bring him somewhere calm and isolated to recover," Dumbledore argued. Minister Bagnold surveyed the devastation, her expression grave. "Albus, I've always respected your judgment, but this." She gestured at the ruins. "This is beyond normal accidental magic. This is beyond anything we've seen from a child. The amount of power required to cause this level of destruction." "What are you suggesting, Millicent?" Dumbledore's voice had gone dangerously quiet. Before she could answer, a commotion broke out at the perimeter. A large Muggle man was fighting against the magical restraints of 2 Aurors, his face mottled with rage and fear despite the blood running from a gash on his forehead. "That's Vernon Dursley," an obliviator reported. "We can't seem to modify his memory properly, he's in some kind of shock." "Where is the boy?" Vernon bellowed, spittle flying from his lips. "That freak nearly killed my family." Dumbledore's eyes flashed with rare anger. "And how exactly did a 4-year-old child come to release such magic, Mr. Dursley? What might have triggered such fear or distress?" Vernon's face went from purple to white. "We gave him a home. Fed him. Clothed him. And this is how he repays us. He's a monster. Just like his parents." A hush fell over the gathered witches and wizards. Dumbledore stepped toward Vernon, and despite being wandless, the air around him seemed to crackle with power. "Perhaps," Dumbledore said softly, "we should discuss the conditions of Harry's upbringing." Minister Bagnold intervened. "Not here, not now. Obliviate him properly and get the Dursleys to St. Mungo's for treatment." She turned to Dumbledore. "The boy comes to the Ministry first for assessment. That's final." "And then?" Dumbledore challenged. "And then we decide what to do with potentially the most dangerous young wizard alive." Harry woke to unfamiliar voices and strange surroundings. He was lying on something soft, much softer than his cupboard mattress, and bright light pressed against his eyelids. His whole body felt worn out, like after one of Dudley's hairy hunting sessions, but worse. "He's waking up," someone whispered. Harry forced his eyes open. A circle of strange faces peered down at him, adults wearing funny clothes. Robes, like in the fairy tale books he'd seen Dudley throw away. "Hello, Harry," said one of them, an old man with a very long white beard and half-moon glasses. "How are you feeling?" Harry tried to sit up, but his arms trembled with the effort. "Careful now," the old man said. "You've been through quite an ordeal." Fear flooded back. The storm. The cupboard. The strange feelings. The explosion. Uncle Vernon. Harry whispered. "Aunt Petunia. Dudley. Did I?" "They're all alive," the old man assured him. "Injured, but they will recover fully." Harry's small body sagged with relief. Then he looked around properly for the first time. He was in a large stone room with high ceilings. Other adults stood nearby, some writing on parchment, others waving what looked like sticks that emitted colored lights. "Where am I? Who are you?" Harry's voice trembled slightly. "You are at the Ministry of Magic, Harry. My name is Albus Dumbledore." "Magic?" Harry's eyes widened. "But Uncle Vernon says there's no such thing as magic." A murmur ran through the assembled adults. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled, though his expression remained serious. "I'm afraid your uncle was quite mistaken. Magic is very real. And you, Harry, are a wizard." "A wizard?" Harry blinked in confusion. "But I'm just Harry." "No, child. You are Harry Potter, a wizard, and quite an extraordinary one, it seems." Before Harry could ask any of the 1,000 questions swirling in his mind, the door opened and more people entered. A stern-looking woman in official-looking robes led the group. "Is he conscious?" "Good." She approached the bed where Harry lay. "Mr. Potter, I am Millicent Bagnold, Minister for Magic." Harry just stared at her, overwhelmed. "Do you remember what happened at your relative's home?" she asked. Harry nodded slowly. "I got scared of the storm. Uncle Vernon locked me in my cupboard. Then I felt all hot inside, and everything just exploded." Tears welled in his eyes. "I didn't mean to, I promise. I tried to stop it." "Your cupboard?" Dumbledore interjected, his voice suddenly sharp. Harry nodded again. "That's where I sleep. Under the stairs." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Dumbledore turned to Minister Bagnold, his eyes no longer twinkling but cold as ice. "I believe we need to discuss Harry's living arrangements, Minister. Immediately. Later, Albus." She turned back to Harry. "Young man, the magical surge you created was extremely powerful. Far beyond what any child your age should be capable of. Do you understand that you destroyed an entire house?" Harry's lower lip trembled. "I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't rebuild houses or repair the damage to the Statute of Secrecy," said a thin-faced man with a toothbrush mustache who had entered with the minister. "Minister, we need to make a decision about containment." "Containment?" Dumbledore's voice was dangerous. "Barty, he is a child, not a creature. A child who just demonstrated more raw magical power than most adult wizards. We have protocols for this level of magical threat." "Threat?" Harry's small voice cut through the argument. Am I bad?" The room fell silent. Harry sat there, tiny on the large examination table, green eyes wide with confusion and fear. In that moment, he looked so much like his mother that several of the older witches and wizards present had to look away. Dumbledore moved to Harry's side, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "No, Harry. You are not bad. You simply have a great deal of magic inside you, and without training, it sometimes escapes your control. Can I learn to control it? So I don't hurt anyone else?" Dumbledore smiled. "Yes, Harry. That's exactly what will help you do." "Not so fast," Minister Bagnold interrupted. "The Wizengamot will need to be consulted. This situation is unprecedented." The boy is my responsibility, Dumbledore countered. I placed him with his relatives to keep him safe. And how did that work out? Crouch asked sarcastically, gesturing at the reports of destruction. Harry shrank back on the table, drawing his knees to his chest. Perhaps, came a new voice, smooth and cold, this conversation would be better continued without frightening the child further. A thin man with sallow skin and long black hair had entered silently. His black robes billowed around him as he approached. Severus, Dumbledore acknowledged. Thank you for coming so quickly. Snape. What's he doing here? Crouch demanded. Professor Snape is Hogwarts potions master and an expert in magical control techniques, Dumbledore explained. I asked him to assess Harry's condition. Snape approached the bed where Harry sat. Dark eyes met green, and something complicated passed across Snape's face. Hello, Mr. Potter, he said stiffly. Hello, sir, Harry whispered. I need to check your magical levels. It won't hurt. Snape drew his wand. Stay still. Harry froze as Snape waved his wand in complex patterns. Colored lights surrounded Harry, shifting from bright gold to deep crimson, then settling into a pulsing emerald green. Snape's eyebrows rose slightly. Interesting. What is it, Severus? Dumbledore asked. His magical core should be depleted after such a discharge. It's not. It's actually, expanding. Snape lowered his wand. I've never seen anything like it. Crouch stepped forward. All the more reason for containment until, that's quite enough, Barty, Dumbledore interrupted firmly. Harry will come to Hogwarts where he can be properly monitored and taught to control his abilities. Absolutely not. Crouch protested. The Wizengamot must vote on this. We need magical restraints, not coddling. Restraints? Harry squeaked, panic rising. Please don't lock me up. I'll be good. No one is locking you up, Harry, Dumbledore assured him, though his gaze remained fixed challengingly on Crouch. Minister Bagnold massaged her temples. Enough. We'll take this to an emergency session of the Wizengamot tomorrow. Until then. She hesitated, clearly torn. Until then, Dumbledore said firmly, Harry comes to Hogwarts under my direct supervision. Bagnold studied the old wizard's determined face, then looked at the frightened child. Finally, she nodded. Fine. But I'm assigning Aurors to accompany you. And Dumbledore, if anything else happens. I understand the gravity of the situation, Minister. Dumbledore turned to Harry with a gentle smile. Would you like to see Hogwarts, Harry? It's a castle filled with magic. Harry's eyes widened. A real castle? With knights and everything? Even better, Dumbledore chuckled, offering his hand. It has moving staircases and talking paintings. Harry hesitantly took the offered hand, and for the first time since waking, a tiny smile tugged at his lips. The journey to Hogwarts was bewildering for young Harry. First came the disorienting sensation of side-along apparition to Hogsmeade Village. Sorry about that, my boy, most find their first time rather unpleasant, then a carriage ride pulled by creatures Harry could somehow see but the Aurors accompanying them seemed to look straight through. Thestrals, Dumbledore had explained softly. Visible only to those who have witnessed death. But I haven't, Harry had whispered back. Dumbledore's eyes had grown sad then. You were very young, Harry. But you were there when your mother died protecting you. Now, as the carriage approached the castle, Harry pressed his face against the window in wonder. Hogwarts rose majestically against the night sky, windows glowing with warm light, towers reaching toward the stars. It was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Welcome to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Harry, Dumbledore said. Your new temporary home. Harry couldn't believe this magical castle would be where he'd stay instead of the cupboard under the stairs. It seemed impossible, like a dream he'd wake from at any moment. The carriage stopped at the main entrance, and Dumbledore helped Harry down. The two Aurors assigned by Minister Bagnold followed at a discreet distance. Snape had traveled separately and was already waiting at the doors, his face unreadable. Professor McGonagall has prepared a room in the staff wing, Dumbledore informed Harry as they entered the castle. During term, students sleep in dormitories, but since it's summer and you're our special guest. Harry wasn't really listening. He was too busy staring at everything, the moving portraits that whispered as he passed, the suits of armor that seemed to turn their heads, the floating candles that illuminated the entrance hall. It's real, he breathed. Magic is really real. Indeed it is, Mr. Potter, came a stern but not unkind voice. A tall witch in emerald robes stood at the top of the marble staircase. And you have quite a lot of it, from what I hear. Harry, this is Professor McGonagall, Dumbledore introduced. She teaches Transfiguration and is deputy headmistress of Hogwarts. Harry ducked his head shyly. Hello, ma'am. McGonagall's stern expression softened slightly. Come along, Mr. Potter. You must be exhausted. We've prepared a room where you can rest. As they climbed the stairs, Harry suddenly stopped, looking worried. What about my clothes and things? An uncomfortable silence fell. No one wanted to tell the child that everything he owned was now buried under the rubble of Privet Drive. Not to worry, Dumbledore said gently. We'll provide everything you need. Will I go back to Aunt Petunia's when they fix the house? The adults exchanged glances. It was Snape who finally spoke, his voice carefully neutral. That remains to be decided, Potter. For now, concentrate on resting and learning to control your abilities. They led Harry through corridors and up moving staircases. They change. Harry gasped in delight, until they reached a comfortable-looking room with a four-poster bed, a small desk, and windows overlooking the lake. This will be your room, Harry, McGonagall explained. The bathroom is through that door. If you need anything, just call for a house elf named Topsy. She'll be looking after you. What's a house elf? Harry asked, but his question was answered immediately when a small creature with bat-like ears and tennis ball eyes appeared with a crack. Young Master Potter called for Topsy, the elf squeaked. Harry jumped back in surprise, then immediately apologized. Sorry. I didn't mean to be rude. I've just never seen, a house elf, sir. Topsy is being assigned to care for young Master Potter during his stay at Hogwarts. The elf beamed at him. Thank you, Harry said politely, which seemed to delight Topsy beyond measure. Topsy will bring you some dinner and clean clothes, McGonagall said. Try to get some rest, Mr. Potter. Tomorrow will be eventful. After McGonagall left, Dumbledore lingered. Harry, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Yes, sir. How did your relatives treat you? Really? Harry looked down at his two big shoes. They don't like me very much. They say I'm a freak. Uncle Vernon gets angry a lot, especially when strange things happen around me. He hesitated. They make me sleep in the cupboard under the stairs, and sometimes they forget to give me dinner if I've been bad. Dumbledore closed his eyes briefly, pain crossing his features. I see. And did they ever hurt you physically? Harry shrugged. Sometimes Uncle Vernon grabs me really hard. And Dudley, that's my cousin, he likes to play Harry hunting with his friends. Harry hunting? They chase me and if they catch me, they hit me. But I'm fast, so they don't catch me much anymore. A faint tremor ran through the room. A water glass on the bedside table cracked slightly. Harry's eyes widened in fear. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Dumbledore placed a calming hand on Harry's shoulder. It's all right, Harry. That was actually my magic reacting, not yours. He sighed heavily. I owe you an apology. I placed you with your aunt and uncle believing they would care for you properly. I was wrong, and you have suffered for my mistake. Harry wasn't sure what to say to that. Adults had never apologized to him before. "Get some rest now," Dumbledore said, moving toward the door. "And Harry? Whatever happens tomorrow, remember that you are not dangerous or bad. You simply have extraordinary gifts that need guidance." After Dumbledore left, Topsy returned with a tray of food that made Harry's eyes bulge: roast chicken, potatoes, vegetables, and treacle tart. He'd never been allowed to eat so much at once. She also brought pajamas that actually fit him, not Dudley's old ones that hung off his small frame. As Harry climbed into the largest, softest bed he'd ever seen, he tried to process everything that had happened. His relative's house destroyed. Magic being real. Being a wizard himself. This amazing castle. And tomorrow, something called the Wizengamot would decide what to do with him. Despite his exhaustion, sleep was slow to come. "The most dangerous wizard alive," declared the Daily Prophet's front page the next morning. Below the headline was a moving photograph of the destroyed Privet Drive, with Ministry officials searching through the rubble. "Uncontrolled magical surge from boy who lived destroys Muggle home," read the subtitle. "Ministry considers unprecedented containment measures." The article, penned by an ambitious young reporter named Rita Skeeter, was heavy on speculation and light on facts. Sources within the Ministry confirmed that young Harry Potter, already famous for his mysterious defeat of you-know-who as an infant, demonstrated terrifying magical power yesterday when he completely obliterated his Muggle relative's home in a fit of accidental magic. Minister Bagnold has convened an emergency session of the Wizengamot to determine appropriate measures for what one unspeakable called potentially the most naturally powerful magical child born this century. While Albus Dumbledore insists the boy is just a child who needs training, others within the Ministry argue for magical binding or containment. "We've never seen this level of raw power in someone so young," said an anonymous source within the Department of Magical Accidents. "If he can do this at 4, what might he do at 17? This reporter wonders, is the boy who lived our savior, or a ticking magical time bomb? And what really happened the night the Potters died? Was you-know-who's defeat merely the first manifestation of an unprecedented and potentially dangerous magical talent? The Wizengamot meets today to decide the fate of the most dangerous wizard alive." The paper was being read in households across Wizarding Britain, including the Stark cells of Azkaban prison, where guards had carelessly left a copy near the maximum security wing. Sirius Black, thin and haggard after 3 years of imprisonment, caught sight of the headline as a Dementor glided past his cell. Despite the creature's soul-chilling effect, he forced himself to focus, to reach through the bars and snag the paper as it fluttered in the draft. "Harry," he whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse as he stared at the article. "My godson." For the first time in years, a spark lit in Sirius Black's deadened eyes. A purpose. A reason to fight the despair that had consumed him. Harry needed him now more than ever. In that moment, Sirius Black made a decision. He would escape Azkaban, a feat thought impossible, and find his godson. Whatever it took. Harry woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the disorienting feeling of not knowing where he was. Then yesterday's events crashed back, and he sat up quickly, looking around the room at Hogwarts. It hadn't been a dream. "Good morning, young sir." Topsy appeared with a crack, carrying a breakfast tray. "Professor Dumbledore says young master must eat well before the big meeting." Harry accepted the tray, amazed at the amount of food: eggs, sausages, toast, porridge with honey, and pumpkin juice. As he ate, Professor McGonagall arrived with a set of child-sized robes in dark green. "You'll need to look presentable for the Wizengamot," she explained, laying out the clothes. "Do you know what's happening today, Mr. Potter?" Harry shook his head, his mouth full of toast. McGonagall's lips thinned. "The Wizengamot is our magical government's high court. They're meeting to discuss what happened at your relative's house and what should be done about your magical education going forward." "Am I in trouble?" Harry asked in a small voice. "No, child. Accidental magic is just that, accidental. No child is punished for it. She hesitated. However, the scale of what happened has caused concerns. Because I'm dangerous. Harry remembered the thin man's, Crouch's, words from yesterday. McGonagall sat on the edge of his bed. Mr. Potter, Harry. Magic is a gift, but like any powerful gift, it requires control and understanding. What happened yesterday shows that you have extraordinary magical potential. Some people fear what they don't understand. Will they take my magic away? The thought terrified him, though he'd only known about it for a day. No one can take your magic away, McGonagall assured him. But some may argue for restricting it temporarily. Harry didn't like the sound of that. Will Professor Dumbledore be there? Yes, and he'll speak on your behalf. She stood, her expression softening. Finish your breakfast and get dressed. I'll return in 30 minutes to escort you to Hogsmeade, where we'll use the fleur to reach the Ministry. After she left, Harry hurriedly finished eating and dressed in the unfamiliar robes. They were far nicer than anything he'd ever worn, made of soft material that actually fit him properly. He tried unsuccessfully to flatten his unruly black hair before giving up. When McGonagall returned, she was accompanied by Dumbledore and, surprisingly, Snape. The potions master eyed Harry critically. Did you even attempt to comb that hair, Potter? He asked. It doesn't really work, sir, Harry replied honestly. Aunt Petunia once cut it all off. She was so fed up with it, but it all grew back overnight. Snape's eyebrows rose slightly. Interesting. Spontaneous human transfiguration at a young age is exceedingly rare. Indeed, Dumbledore agreed. Another indication of Harry's unusual magical development. Shall we go? The Wizengamot waits for no wizard, not even me. The journey to the Ministry was another new experience for Harry, this time by fleur powder, which left him dizzy, covered in soot, and sprawled on the floor of a grand atrium filled with witches and wizards rushing about their business. In the center stood a magnificent fountain featuring golden statues of magical beings. People stopped to stare as Dumbledore helped Harry to his feet. Whispers followed them. Is that Harry Potter? So small. Did you see what he did to that Muggle house? The most dangerous wizard alive. Harry tried to make himself smaller, uncomfortable with the attention. They were escorted to a lift by two stern-looking Aurors, then down a corridor to a large, imposing door. The Wizengamot chamber, Dumbledore explained. Don't be frightened, Harry. Just answer any questions truthfully. Harry nodded, swallowing hard as the doors swung open. The chamber was circular, with tiered seats rising like an amphitheater. Witches and wizards in plum-colored robes with an elaborate silver W embroidered on them filled most seats. In the center was a single chair. That's where you'll sit, Dumbledore whispered. I must join the Wizengamot members, as I'm the chief warlock. But I'll be right there. He pointed to a prominent seat. Harry nodded nervously. Snape and McGonagall remained near the entrance as Harry was led to the center chair by a court official. Once seated, he felt terribly exposed with everyone looking down at him. Minister Bagnold rose. Emergency session of the Wizengamot, July 31, 1984. Matter before the court, the magical incident at No. 4 Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey, and the determination of appropriate measures regarding Harry James Potter, minor, age 4, in light of demonstrated extreme magical ability. Harry blinked in surprise. Today was his birthday. With everything that had happened, he'd completely forgotten. Before we begin, Dumbledore interrupted, rising from his seat, I wish to register a formal protest regarding the treatment of Mr. Potter by his Muggle relatives, with whom he was placed following his parents' deaths. Evidence suggests neglect and emotional abuse, which likely contributed to yesterday's magical outburst. Murmurs ran through the chamber. That matter can be addressed separately, Bagnold replied. Today we focus on the immediate concern of Mr. Potter's magical containment and future placement. Barty Crouch Sr. stood. Minister, members of the Wizengamot, the facts are clear. The magical discharge recorded yesterday exceeded anything in ministry records for accidental magic. The boy obliterated an entire house and damaged several others. Only through sheer luck were there no fatalities. Mr. Crouch, Dumbledore interjected, might I remind the court that we are discussing a 4-year-old child who had no knowledge of his magical abilities, was being kept in a cupboard during a frightening thunderstorm, and whose magic responded to his distress. Harry shrank further into the chair as people began arguing above him. The words swirled around: unprecedented power, potential threat, magical binding, restrictive monitoring. Finally, a witch with a monocle stood. Perhaps we should hear from the child himself. Mr. Potter, can you tell us what happened yesterday, in your own words? Harry looked up, terrified to speak before so many stern-faced adults. But Dumbledore gave him an encouraging nod. I was in my cupboard, he began softly. Uncle Vernon locked me in because I turned Dudley's cake blue by accident. There was a big storm, and I was scared because the thunder was so loud. Your cupboard? The witch with the monocle interrupted. Yes, ma'am. The cupboard under the stairs. That's where I sleep. More murmurs, angrier this time. Continue, Mr. Potter, the witch prompted. I started feeling all hot inside, like I was filling up with something. I tried to make it stop, but it just got bigger and bigger. Harry's voice wobbled. Then everything just exploded. I didn't mean to hurt anyone or break the house. I just couldn't stop it. And how do you feel about your magic now? The witch asked. Harry considered this. I'm scared of it, a bit. But Professor Dumbledore says I can learn to control it. He looked up earnestly. I want to learn. I don't want to hurt anyone ever again. The chamber fell silent. The witch with the monocle, Amelia Bones, Harry would later learn, gave him a small, approving nod. Crouch was unmoved. Intentions aside, the risk remains. I propose magical restrictions until the boy reaches Hogwarts age and can receive proper training. For everyone's safety, including his own. What sort of restrictions? McGonagall called from the back of the chamber. Magical dampening cuffs, Crouch replied. Used for certain prisoners, but they can be modified for, absolutely not. Dumbledore thundered, his magic briefly filling the chamber with a palpable pressure. You will not place a child in devices designed for criminals. Harry's eyes widened at this display of controlled power from the old wizard. Minister Bagnold raised her hands for silence. Alternative proposals. An elderly wizard stood. The boy clearly needs training now, not in 7 years when he reaches Hogwarts age. I propose early admission to Hogwarts, under controlled conditions, with specialized tutoring in magical control. At Hogwarts? With hundreds of students? Crouch objected. The risk is too great. It's summer holiday now, Dumbledore pointed out. By September, with proper initial training, Harry could have basic control. He could have private quarters, separate from the dormitories, and continue specialized training alongside observing regular classes where appropriate. The debate continued for hours. Harry, exhausted and overwhelmed, eventually dozed off in the chair, waking only when a gentle hand shook his shoulder. Harry, Dumbledore said softly. It's over. Harry rubbed his eyes. What happened? What did they decide? Dumbledore's expression was a mixture of relief and concern. You'll be coming to Hogwarts, as I proposed. You'll have special tutors for magical control and early education in the wizarding world. So I don't have to go back to the Dursleys. Harry couldn't keep the hope from his voice. No, Harry. You will never return there. Joy surged through Harry, and with it, the chair he was sitting on suddenly rose 3 feet into the air before crashing back down. Several Wizengamot members who had been leaving turned to stare. Case in point, Crouch muttered darkly. Harry clapped his hands over his mouth. Sorry. But Dumbledore merely chuckled. And that, members of the Wizengamot, is precisely why Harry needs proper guidance, not restrictions. He turned back to Harry. However, there is one condition I'm afraid I couldn't prevent. What's that, sir? The minister has officially classified you as magically volatile, a designation usually reserved for magical creatures or enchanted objects that are unpredictably powerful. You'll be monitored closely, and your progress reviewed monthly by the Department of Magical Accidents. Harry didn't fully understand, but he nodded anyway. There's something else, Dumbledore continued, his voice gentler. The Daily Prophet, our newspaper, has already published a story about what happened. They're calling you the most dangerous wizard alive. Harry's face fell. But I don't want to be dangerous. I know, my boy. And you won't be, once you learn control. But I'm afraid that people might be cautious around you for a while. As if to confirm this, as they left the chamber, witches and wizards gave them a wide berth in the corridors, some even backing against walls as Harry passed. Why are they so afraid of me? Harry whispered to Dumbledore. I'm just little. People fear what they don't understand, Harry. And right now, your magic is something of a mystery even to experts like myself. Dumbledore placed a comforting hand on Harry's shoulder. But in time, as you learn control and they see you're just a normal boy with extraordinary gifts, the fear will fade. Harry wasn't so sure, but he nodded anyway. Now, Dumbledore said more cheerfully as they rejoined McGonagall and Snape, I believe today is a special day, is it not? Your birthday. Harry looked up in surprise. You knew? Of course. And at Hogwarts, birthdays are always celebrated. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. Especially 5th birthdays. They're particularly magical. For the first time in days, Harry smiled properly, a bright, hopeful smile that momentarily banished the shadows of fear and confusion. Happy birthday, Mr. Potter, McGonagall said, her stern face softening. Even Snape gave a curt nod of acknowledgement. As they headed back to Hogwarts, Harry couldn't help but think that despite everything, the explosion, the scary Wizengamot, being called dangerous, this was already the best birthday he'd ever had. The following weeks were a whirlwind of new experiences for Harry. True to Dumbledore's word, Hogwarts celebrated his birthday with a small but perfect party, his first ever. The house elves baked a cake that changed colors, though thankfully didn't explode, and he received his first proper gifts, a toy broomstick that hovered a foot off the ground from McGonagall, a beginner's potion kit from a grudging Snape, and from Dumbledore, a wand. But sir, Harry had said, confused, don't I need to go to a shop for a wand? Ordinarily, yes, Dumbledore had explained. Mr. Ollivander would fit you with the perfect wand when you turn 11. However, your situation is unique. This is a training wand, less powerful than a proper one, but it will help you channel and control your magic in a focused way. The training sessions began immediately. Each morning after breakfast, Harry would meet with Professor Flitwick, the tiny charms master, who taught him basic magical theory and simple focusing exercises. Magic responds to emotion, Mr. Potter, Flitwick squeaked during their first lesson. What happened at your relative's home was a perfect example of emotion-driven accidental magic. Our goal is to help you recognize when your magic is building up and give you tools to release it safely. The exercises were surprisingly simple, breathing techniques, visualization, and basic wand movements with no actual spells yet. Harry took to them eagerly, determined to prove he wasn't dangerous. Afternoons were often spent with Professor McGonagall, who focused on helping Harry understand the connection between his intentions and his magic. Transfiguration requires precision and clear intention, she explained. For a young wizard with as much raw power as you possess, learning to direct your intentions clearly is essential. Even Snape contributed, though his sessions were less frequent and more intimidating. He taught Harry about mental discipline and something he called occlumency. Your mind is undisciplined, Potter, he'd snapped during their first lesson. Your emotions spill out and your magic follows. You must learn to compartmentalize, to separate feeling from action. The techniques Snape taught were the most difficult, but Harry persisted, driven by the memory of the destroyed house and the fear in people's eyes. Between lessons, Harry explored the castle with Hagrid, the enormous, kind-hearted groundskeeper who had known his parents. "Your dad was a right troublemaker," Hagrid told him as they walked the grounds one afternoon. "But brilliant with transfiguration, he was. And your mum, smartest witch of her age, with a gift for charms and potions." Harry soaked up these stories like a sponge, treasuring each new detail about the parents he couldn't remember. Not everyone at Hogwarts was as welcoming as Hagrid, however. Filch, the caretaker, muttered darkly about dangerous brats whenever Harry passed. Some of the professors who returned early for the autumn term watched him warily. And then there were the ministry officials who came weekly to observe his progress and report back to Minister Bagnold. "They're afraid of what they don't understand," Dumbledore reminded Harry after a particularly unpleasant visit from a Department of Magical Accidents official who had insisted on seeing Harry deliberately perform magic to assess containment requirements. "But I'm getting better," Harry said, frustrated. "I haven't had an accident in almost 2 weeks." "And that is remarkable progress," Dumbledore assured him. "But people who have read about the most dangerous wizard alive in the Daily Prophet expect something different." "They expect me to be scary," Harry said perceptively. "Some do, yes. It's up to you to show them otherwise." As September approached, the castle began filling with staff preparing for the new term. Harry, who had grown accustomed to having whole corridors to himself, suddenly found himself the object of curious stares and whispered conversations. "Is that him? So small to have caused so much damage. Dumbledore must be mad, keeping him here with children coming." Harry tried to ignore them, focusing instead on his training and the exciting prospect of soon seeing other magical children his age. "The students arrive tomorrow," Dumbledore told him over dinner the night before term began. "You'll have your own room near my office, as we discussed with the Wizengamot. You won't attend classes formally yet, but you may observe some that I deem appropriate, and continue your special training." "Will the other children be afraid of me too?" Harry asked quietly. Dumbledore considered this. "Some might be, at first. Children often repeat what they hear at home, and I'm afraid the Daily Prophet has continued to run rather sensationalist stories about you. But children can also be remarkably accepting. Be yourself, Harry, a kind, thoughtful boy who is learning to control his gifts, and you may be surprised." Harry nodded, though anxiety still churned in his stomach. The next evening, hidden in an alcove above the Great Hall, Harry watched in wonder as hundreds of students filed in for the start-of-term feast. The sorting ceremony fascinated him, a talking hat that could see inside your mind. From his vantage point, he could see 4 distinct tables, each filled with students wearing robes trimmed in different colors. "That's Gryffindor," Dumbledore explained softly, having joined Harry in his hiding spot. "Where your parents were sorted. Brave and daring. Then Hufflepuff, known for loyalty and hard work. Ravenclaw values intelligence and creativity. And Slytherin prizes ambition and cunning. Where would I go?" Harry whispered. "That, my boy, is a question for another time. The hat considers many things, including one's own preferences." After the feast, as prefects led the first years to their dormitories, Dumbledore escorted Harry to his new room, larger than his first one, with a small sitting area and bookshelves already filled with beginner magic books. "Tomorrow, if you wish, you may observe Professor Flitwick's third-year charms class. I've spoken with him, and he's prepared a special seat where you won't be too disruptive." Harry nodded eagerly. Despite his nerves about meeting other students, he was excited to see real magic lessons. That night, as Harry drifted off to sleep in his new room, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a castle full of students, he reflected on how completely his life had changed in just over a month. From a cupboard under the stairs to a magical castle. From being called Freak to being called the most dangerous wizard alive. Neither felt quite right. Somewhere in between, he thought sleepily, was just Harry, a boy with too much magic who was finally learning what it meant to belong. The headline in the Daily Prophet the next morning sent shockwaves through Wizarding Britain: Sirius Black escapes Azkaban. Mass murderer and you-know-who supporter at large. The article detailed how Black, imprisoned for betraying the Potters and killing 13 people with a single curse, had somehow escaped the inescapable prison. The Ministry was in chaos, with Aurors deployed across the country and Dementors authorized to administer the kiss on site. But buried in the middle of the article was a detail that made Dumbledore's blood run cold. Sources within the Ministry express concern that Black may be targeting Harry Potter, now residing at Hogwarts after being declared the most dangerous wizard alive last month. Black, who was heard muttering "he's at Hogwarts" in the days before his escape, was the Potter family's secret keeper and betrayed them to you-know-who. With the boy now more visible and vulnerable, authorities fear Black may attempt to finish what his master started. Dumbledore set the paper down, his expression grave. Security at Hogwarts would need to be strengthened. Harry, already burdened with fear and scrutiny, would need to be protected from this new threat. And somewhere in Britain, a large black dog was making its way steadily north, driven by a single thought: find Harry. Protect his godson. The most dangerous wizard alive was about to face another challenge, one that would eventually reveal truths about his past that had long been hidden. Chapter 2, The Sanctuary. The wind howled across the Scottish Highlands, whipping the tall grass into frenzied waves. Nestled between two mountains, protected by ancient wards and unplottable charms, stood a stone cottage with smoke curling from its chimney. To Muggle eyes, if any ever ventured this far into the wilderness, it would appear as nothing more than a dangerous ruin with warning signs. Inside, a 7-year-old boy with untamable black hair and startling green eyes sat cross-legged on a worn carpet, eyes closed, palms upturned on his knees. "Feel your magic, Harry," came the gentle voice of Remus Lupin. "Don't try to push or pull. Just feel it flowing through you, like blood in your veins." Harry's face scrunched in concentration. 3 years of daily practice had improved his control drastically, but the raw power inside him still sometimes felt like trying to direct a river with his bare hands. "It's slippery today," Harry muttered. "Keeps jumping around. That's normal. Magic responds to emotions, remember? And you're excited about your birthday tomorrow." Harry opened one eye. "Is someone coming? You promised it wouldn't just be us this time." Lupin smiled, the action creasing the premature lines on his young face. "Perhaps. But that doesn't mean you can skip your focusing exercises." Harry sighed dramatically but closed his eye again. The cottage, their home for the past 2 years, had become his sanctuary after the disaster at Hogwarts. Living in a castle full of curious students had proven too stressful for a child still learning basic control. After one particularly bad incident involving accidental magic that had sent 3 6th years to the hospital wing, Dumbledore had made the difficult decision to move Harry elsewhere. Remus Lupin, friend to James and Lily Potter, had volunteered despite his "furry little problem," as he called it. With specialized accommodations for his monthly transformations and extensive protective enchantments around the property, the remote cottage became home to the reluctant werewolf and the boy still called the most dangerous wizard alive by the wizarding papers. "I can feel it now," Harry said softly, interrupting Lupin's thoughts. A faint blue-white glow emanated from the boy's skin, not the violent, explosive energy of 3 years ago, but a controlled, steady luminescence. "It's like a lake inside me. Huge but calm. Good. Now try the candle exercise." Without opening his eyes, Harry extended one hand toward a candlestick on the table. His finger pointed, and the wick ignited with a tiny pop. No wand, no incantation, just pure intent. "Excellent," Lupin praised. "Now extinguish it the same way." The flame winked out. Again, but this time, try to make the flame exactly 3 inches tall. Harry's brow furrowed. Precision was harder than raw power. The candle relight, its flame jumping to nearly 6 inches before Harry wrestled it down, finally stabilizing it at approximately 3 inches. Sweat beaded on his forehead from the effort. How's that? Much better than last week, Lupin said honestly. You're gaining finer control. Harry opened his eyes and flopped backwards onto the carpet. It's still hard. Like trying to write with oven mitts on. Lupin chuckled at the analogy. A surprisingly apt description. Your magical core is extraordinarily powerful, Harry. Most wizards have a trickle of magic they channel through their wands. You have a waterfall trying to flow through a garden hose. Harry had heard variations of this explanation for years. First from the unspeakables who had examined him after the Dursley incident, then from his Hogwarts tutors, and now regularly from Remus. It didn't make the work any less frustrating. Will I ever be normal? Harry asked, staring at the ceiling. Lupin considered his answer carefully. Define normal. You know. Regular wizard stuff. Using a wand without it exploding. Going to Hogwarts without making things fly around when I laugh too hard. Not having everyone look at me like I might blow up any second. Remus moved to sit beside Harry on the carpet. I can't promise normal, Harry. But I can promise better. Each month shows improvement. Remember when you first came here? You couldn't even feel your magical core, let alone direct it. Harry nodded reluctantly. Those first months with Remus had been difficult. Removed from Hogwarts after the incident with the 6th years, Harry had accidentally banished them through a wall when they'd startled him. He'd felt like a failure. The Daily Prophet had run wild with stories about Potter's rampage and danger at Hogwarts. The Ministry had nearly insisted on magical restraints again. Dumbledore's solution, a hidden sanctuary with Remus as guardian and tutor, had saved Harry from both publicity and restrictions. Here, away from prying eyes and frightened whispers, he could learn at his own pace. I think that's enough for today, Remus said, rising. How about you help me prepare dinner? Professor McGonagall sent those fresh Scottish salmon you like. Harry jumped up, mood instantly brightening. Can I use magic to flip them? I've been practicing. Wandless cooking charms. That's beyond an EWT level, Remus said with a raised eyebrow. Then he grinned. But I suppose that's never stopped you before. Just don't set the kitchen on fire again. That was one time. Harry protested, following Remus to their small kitchen. And I put it out right away. Yes, with a water charm powerful enough to soak the entire room, including me. Remus ruffled Harry's perpetually messy hair. Proportion, Harry. Always remember proportion. As they prepared dinner together, Harry levitating ingredients while Remus handled the actual cooking, an unfamiliar owl swooped through the kitchen window, dropping a letter on the counter. Ministry seal, Remus noted, his voice carefully neutral as he opened it. Harry pretended to focus on keeping the salt shaker airborne, but watched Remus's face closely. What do they want now? Harry asked when Remus's expression darkened. Nothing important. You're doing that thing where you try to protect me by lying, Harry said flatly. I'm 7 now, Remus. Not 4. Remus sighed. 7 going on 40, apparently. He set the letter down. Mr. Crouch is making his quarterly visit tomorrow. Harry groaned. Bartemius Crouch Sr., head of the Department of International Magical Cooperation but still deeply involved in magical law enforcement, had appointed himself Harry's official ministry overseer. His visits were cold, clinical evaluations that always left Harry feeling like a dangerous creature rather than a child. On my birthday? Seriously? I tried to reschedule. He insists this date works best with his calendar. Remus's tone suggested what he thought of Crouch's priorities. He's going to make me do all the tests again, isn't he? The magical output measurements and the control exercises. And he'll bring that awful quill that writes down everything I say like I'm a criminal. We've been practicing for exactly those tests, Remus reminded him. And you've made remarkable progress. Show him what you showed me today, and even Crouch will have to acknowledge improvement. Harry wasn't convinced. In 3 years of evaluations, Crouch had never once seemed impressed by Harry's progress. The man seemed determined to find fault, to prove that Harry remained a threat requiring containment. "There's something else," Remus said, looking uncomfortable. "Dumbledore will be coming too." "Professor Dumbledore's coming?" "That's great." Harry brightened, then caught Remus's expression. "Isn't it?" "Ordinarily, yes. But he's bringing someone with him. Someone who wants to meet you." Harry's shoulders tensed. "Who?" "Augusta Longbottom and her grandson, Neville." "Longbottom?" Harry frowned. "Why does that sound familiar?" "Frank and Alice Longbottom were friends of your parents," Remus explained gently. "They were Aurors who fought against Voldemort. After he fell, some of his followers attacked them. They're in St. Mungo's now. Their son Neville lives with his grandmother. So why does she want to meet me? Is Neville, like me?" Harry asked hesitantly. "Not exactly. But Augusta has been asking Dumbledore for this meeting for some time. Neville was born just a day before you. In another life, you might have grown up as friends." Harry absorbed this, weighing the prospect of meeting a boy his age against the anxiety of another evaluation. "Will Crouch let them stay?" "He usually makes everyone leave during the tests." "Dumbledore will handle Crouch," Remus assured him. "Now, back to dinner before we burn the salmon." Later that night, as Harry lay in bed, he heard the distinctive crack of apparition outside. Someone had arrived after dark, unusual for their isolated home. He slipped out of bed and crept to his window, peering through the curtains. In the moonlight, he could make out Remus standing in the yard, his wand drawn but not raised, facing a large, shaggy black dog. Except, the dog wasn't a dog anymore. As Harry watched, it transformed into a man, thin, ragged, with long matted hair. Harry gasped, recognizing the face from newspaper photographs. Sirius Black, the escaped murderer, the man who had betrayed his parents. Without thinking, Harry thrust out his hand. The window burst open, and a pulse of magic shot from his fingertips toward the man below. Black went flying backward, landing hard against a tree. Remus spun around, looking up at the window in alarm. "Harry, no," he shouted. "It's not what you think." Harry was already racing down the stairs, magic crackling visibly around him like static electricity. By the time he burst through the front door, Remus had helped the ragged man to his feet. "Get away from him!" Harry yelled, raising both hands threateningly. "He killed my parents." "Harry, stop!" Remus stepped between them. "Listen to me. Sirius didn't betray your parents. He's innocent. He's your godfather." "What?" Harry faltered, his magical aura flickering. "But the papers lied," croaked the man, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Or got it wrong. I never betrayed James and Lily. I would have died first." "Harry," Remus said urgently, "remember your control exercises. Deep breaths. Center yourself." Harry realized he was on the verge of another magical outburst. The familiar warmth was building rapidly in his chest, fueled by confusion and anger. He forced himself to breathe deeply, to feel the energy and guide it back to that internal lake Remus had taught him to visualize. Slowly, the crackling aura faded. The night air, which had been swirling around them like a small cyclone, calmed. "That's it," Remus encouraged. "Now, let's go inside. It's not safe out here, and Sirius has traveled a long way to see you." Harry hesitated, still not trusting the gaunt man with the haunted eyes. "Why should I believe him?" "Because I do," Remus said simply. "And because he's been in hiding for 3 years, watching over you from a distance, when he could have been halfway around the world by now." Black, Sirius, stepped forward cautiously. "I don't blame you for not trusting me, Harry. But I swear on my magic, I never betrayed your parents. It was Peter Pettigrew, the man I supposedly killed. He was their secret keeper, not me. He framed me and escaped. If you're innocent, why not go to the ministry? Clear your name. Harry demanded. A bitter laugh escaped Sirius. The ministry? The same people who threw me in Azkaban without a trial? The same ones who labeled you, dangerous, for accidental magic? He shook his head. They're not interested in truth, Harry. The boy's eyes widened at this. Despite his young age, Harry understood all too well how the ministry operated. Hadn't Crouch been trying for years to get him classified as a magical creature rather than a wizard? Let's continue this inside, Remus insisted. It's not safe for Sirius in the open. Reluctantly, Harry followed them indoors. His mind raced with questions, suspicions, and a strange, unexpected hope. We switched secret keepers at the last minute, Sirius explained, his hands wrapped around a mug of hot tea. They sat in the cottage's small living room, a fire crackling in the grate. It was my idea, my stupid, disastrous idea. Everyone would expect me, James's best friend. No one would suspect Peter. But Peter was working for Voldemort, Remus continued, having already heard this story in bits and pieces over the past hour. He gave up the Potter's location immediately. I went to check on Peter that night, Sirius said, his voice hollow. Found his hiding place empty, no signs of struggle. That's when I knew. Went straight to Godric's Hollow, but I was too late. Harry sat silently, absorbing every word. The story differed wildly from the accepted narrative, but something about it rang true. I saw Hagrid taking you away, Sirius continued, looking directly at Harry. Dumbledore's orders. I tried to claim custody, I'm your godfather, legally your guardian if anything happened to James and Lily. But Hagrid refused. So you went after Pettigrew, Harry said, putting the pieces together. Sirius nodded grimly. Cornered him in a Muggle street. But the little rat was cleverer than I gave him credit for. Shouted for everyone to hear that I'd betrayed Lily and James. Then he blew apart the street with his wand behind his back, cut off his finger, and transformed. Transformed? Harry frowned. Peter, Sirius, and your father were animagi, wizards who could turn into animals, Remus explained. James was a stag. Sirius, as you saw, is a dog. And Peter, a rat, Sirius spat. Perfect form for him. He escaped into the sewers, leaving me to take the blame for everything. Harry studied the man's face, looking for deception. He'd become quite good at reading people, a necessary skill when everyone from ministry officials to Hogwarts professors had been evaluating him constantly for years. I believe you, Harry said finally. Relief flooded Sirius's gaunt features. Thank you, Harry. You look so much like James, but those eyes. He swallowed hard. Pure Lily. So what now? Harry asked, looking between the two men. If you're innocent, we should prove it. Get your name cleared. It's not that simple, Remus sighed. The ministry still considers Sirius their most wanted criminal. And with Crouch coming tomorrow, Crouch? Sirius snarled, half rising from his chair. That bastard is the one who sent me to Azkaban without a trial. He's Harry's ministry-appointed evaluator, Remus explained. Comes quarterly to assess Harry's magical control and make recommendations. Recommendations like putting magical restraints on me, Harry added bitterly. He's been pushing for it since I was 4. Sirius's expression darkened dangerously. Over my dead body. Precisely what we want to avoid, Remus said dryly. Sirius, you'll need to remain as Padfoot, your dog form, while Crouch is here. Dumbledore is coming too, with Augusta and Neville Longbottom. Dumbledore knows I'm innocent. I've been trying to convince him for years, Remus said. He's coming around. But without Pettigrew, there's no proof. Harry, who had been thinking deeply, suddenly sat up straighter. Maybe there is. Not proof of pedigree, but proof you're not trying to hurt me. That's what everyone believes, right? That you escaped to finish what Voldemort started. What are you suggesting? Remus asked cautiously. A wizard's oath, Harry said. I've read about them. If Sirius swears on his magic that he means me no harm and didn't betray my parents, Dumbledore will have to believe him. Sirius nodded immediately. I'll do it. I'll swear anything. It's risky, Remus warned. If Crouch realizes who Padfoot is, we'll be careful, Harry insisted. Sirius can stay in my room during the evaluation. Crouch never goes in there, says it's contaminated with residual magical energy or something. The two adults exchanged looks, communicating silently in the way longtime friends do. It could work, Remus conceded finally. But Sirius, you need to understand, if you're discovered here, I can't protect you. The Ministry already distrusts me because of my condition. And they watch Harry like hawks for any sign of instability. I understand the risks, Sirius said firmly. I've spent 3 years tracking Harry, making sure he's safe. I'm not leaving now. Harry felt a strange warmth that had nothing to do with magic. For the first time, he truly understood what having a godfather meant, someone who would risk everything for him, not because of his power or potential, but simply because he was Harry. You should get back to bed, Remus told Harry, noting his drooping eyelids despite the excitement. Tomorrow will be busy. But I have so many more questions, Harry protested even as he yawned. And I'll answer every one, Sirius promised. We have time now. As Harry climbed the stairs to his room, he heard Sirius ask Remus in a low voice, how bad is it really? The Daily Prophet makes it sound like he's one temper tantrum away from destroying Scotland. The Prophet exaggerates, Remus replied. But his power is unprecedented. We've been working on control techniques for years. He's improved dramatically. But? Sirius prompted, hearing the reservation in his friend's voice. But he's still growing, Sirius. And so is his magic. What he could do at 4 was shocking. What he might be capable of at 17. Their voices faded as Harry closed his bedroom door. He stood for a moment in the darkness, looking at his hands in the moonlight streaming through his window. Normal-looking hands that could channel enough wandless magic to blast a grown man 20 feet or light a candle with perfect precision. Hands that had accidentally destroyed a house when he was only 4. His birthday tomorrow would bring tests, evaluations, and strangers judging his every move. But it would also bring his first real friend his age. And now, unexpectedly, a godfather. Maybe turning 7 wouldn't be so bad after all. Wandless Lumos charm. Controlled intensity. Begin. Harry held out his palm, focusing his magic. A ball of light appeared, hovering just above his hand, not too bright, not too dim. Precisely as practiced. Adjust to maximum safe brightness, Crouch instructed, his enchanted quill scratching notes beside him. Harry increased the light's intensity until it illuminated the entire room like a spotlight, but kept it contained to the small sphere above his palm. Now minimum visibility. The light dimmed to a faint glow, like a distant star. Extinguish. The light winked out. It was the same every visit. Crouch, thin-lipped and disapproving, would put Harry through a battery of standardized magical tests, measuring control, power, and precision. The tests themselves weren't difficult anymore. Harry had been practicing these exact exercises for years. It was Crouch's manner that made them unpleasant, his clinical coldness and obvious disappointment whenever Harry performed well. Wingardium Leviosa. Multiple objects of varying weights. Begin. Harry pointed at the arranged items, a feather, a book, an iron paperweight, and a chair. One by one, he raised them in sequence, holding each at exactly 1 meter off the ground. Now simultaneously. Focusing harder, Harry maintained all 4 objects in the air at once, keeping them perfectly level. Reverse weight order. Harry adjusted, lowering the feather while raising the chair higher, creating a diagonal line of floating objects arranged by weight. Satisfactory, Crouch noted, which from him was practically effusive praise. Now, emotional trigger test. Harry tensed. This was the one he hated most. Object of emotional significance has been placed in this box, Crouch said, indicating a small wooden container. You will open it and maintain complete magical control despite any emotional response. This was new. Usually the emotional trigger test involved Crouch saying something provocative about Harry's parents or his status as dangerous. Never an object before. Warily, Harry approached the box. The last time he'd failed an emotional trigger test had been over a year ago, when Crouch had suggested that Harry's magic made him more like Voldemort than his parents. Harry had accidentally shattered every window in the cottage. He opened the box carefully, then froze in shock. Inside lay a newspaper clipping. A photograph of the destroyed Dursley house, with the headline, "Boy WHO lived becomes Boy WHO destroyed," prominently displayed. Harry hadn't seen images of the destruction he'd caused since that day. The sight hit him like a physical blow, the rubble that had been a house, ministry wizards combing through debris, his uncle's angry face as he shouted at cameras. He felt his magic surge in response to his emotions, not anger this time, but shame and grief. The air around him began to vibrate. "Control, Mr. Potter," Crouch said sharply. "Or do we need to reconsider those magical restraints?" Beside Crouch, Dumbledore frowned. "Barty, this is unnecessarily provocative. Harry hasn't seen these images before." "Precisely the point. Controlled circumstances to test unprepared responses." Harry barely heard them. He was fighting his own internal battle, using every technique Remus had taught him. Breathe. Visualize. Center. Channel. The vibration in the air slowly subsided. The building pressure of magic redirected itself, flowing back into that internal lake rather than exploding outward. When he finally looked up, Harry's eyes were determined rather than upset. "I was 4, he said evenly. "I didn't know what magic was. I know now. I'm in control now." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with unmistakable pride. Even Remus, standing against the wall, looked impressed. Crouch merely made another note. Final test. Magical output measurement. This involved Harry channeling magic through a special device that measured raw power, essentially seeing how much magical energy he could safely release at once. It was the most physically draining test, but also the one Harry secretly enjoyed most. Nowhere else was he encouraged to really open up and show what he could do. The device resembled a crystal ball mounted on a brass stand, with various dials and gauges attached. Harry placed his hands on either side of the crystal, closed his eyes, and began to channel his magic. The crystal glowed, first blue, then white-hot as Harry pushed more power into it. The dials on the device spun rapidly, one of them completing multiple rotations before stopping at its maximum reading. A second gauge, added after Harry's last test had broken the first one, was now approaching its upper limit as well. "Sufficient," Crouch said, but Harry wasn't listening. For the first time, he was experiencing something strange and wonderful. Rather than his magic feeling like an uncontrollable force he was desperately trying to direct, it felt like a perfectly synchronized extension of himself. He could sense the crystal, the magic flowing into it, the capacity it still had to absorb more. "Mr. Potter, you may stop," Crouch said more firmly. But Harry had made a discovery. With precise control, he could feed magic into the crystal without increasing the overall output, creating a perfect equilibrium. The crystal now glowed with steady, unwavering light, the dials fixed at their maximum readings but not straining. "Harry," Dumbledore's voice cut through his concentration. "That's enough, my boy." Harry opened his eyes and carefully withdrew his magic from the crystal. It dimmed gradually rather than shutting off abruptly, another mark of control. Did you see that? Harry asked excitedly. I found the balance point. It could have taken more, but I kept it stable instead. Crouch was examining the readings with a frown. Output exceeds previous measurement by 22%. Still increasing quarter by quarter. He looked up at Dumbledore. This confirms my concerns. The boy's magical growth shows no signs of normalizing. On the contrary, Dumbledore countered, what I observed was extraordinary control. Harry didn't simply channel raw power, he regulated it perfectly. Most adult wizards couldn't achieve that balance. Control is improving, Crouch acknowledged reluctantly. But power continues to exceed safety parameters. My recommendation stands, magical monitoring bracelets, at minimum. Harry's heart sank. After all his progress, after finally finding that perfect synchronization with his magic, Crouch still wanted to restrict him. Your recommendation is noted, Dumbledore said diplomatically. But as Harry's magical guardian, I continue to assert that restraints would be detrimental to his development. Repression of magic at this critical growth stage could cause precisely the instability we're trying to prevent. Crouch gathered his notes, clearly dissatisfied but unable to overrule Dumbledore directly. The Wizengamot will review my findings. This evaluation is concluded. As Crouch packed his instruments, the cottage door opened. Augusta Longbottom swept in, regal and imposing in formal robes, a large stuffed vulture perched atop her hat. Behind her, half hidden, was a round-faced boy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Ah, Augusta, Dumbledore greeted her. Right on time. May I present Harry Potter? Harry, this is Madame Longbottom and her grandson, Neville. Harry, still recovering from the magical exertion of the tests, managed a polite nod. Hello. Augusta Longbottom surveyed him critically. So this is the boy the prophet calls the most dangerous wizard alive. Doesn't look particularly fearsome to me. Gran, Neville whispered, mortified. Well, he doesn't, Augusta said unapologetically. Bit small for his age, if anything. Harry, far from being offended, found himself warming to the direct old woman immediately. The Daily Prophet, Dumbledore said mildly, has a flair for the dramatic that often obscures the truth. Humph, tell me something I don't know. Augusta nudged her grandson forward. Go on, Neville. Say hello properly. Neville took a hesitant step forward. Hello, he stammered. Nice to meet you. Harry smiled, recognizing a kindred spirit in the nervous boy. Want to see something cool, he offered, ignoring the suddenly tense adults around them. I just figured it out during the test. Before anyone could stop him, Harry held out his hand. Above his palm, a perfect miniature replica of Hogwarts castle formed from blue-white magical energy, detailed down to the tiny windows and moving staircases. Merlin's beard, Augusta breathed. Neville's eyes widened in wonder. That's brilliant. Can you teach me? Probably not this specifically, Harry admitted. But I know lots of other cool stuff. And just like that, a friendship was born. While the adults moved to the kitchen to discuss important matters, which Harry suspected involved him but knew better than to ask about directly, the two boys settled in the living room. Harry showed Neville his practice wand and demonstrated simple charms, while Neville shyly shared his knowledge of magical plants. Gran got me a greenhouse for my birthday, Neville explained, animation replacing his earlier nervousness when discussing his passion. I've got 3 different types of magical roses and a fanged geranium. That's brilliant, Harry said sincerely. I've never been good with plants. Things tend to grow too fast or catch fire when I try. Neville laughed, then looked shocked at his own daring. Sorry, I shouldn't. No, it's funny, Harry assured him. Last year I tried to help Remus with the garden and accidentally created a tomato plant that tried to eat his shoe. The boys exchanged more stories, finding common ground despite their different circumstances. Harry learned that Neville lived with his grandmother because his parents were permanently injured by dark wizards. Neville, in turn, discovered that Harry's legendary status made him just as uncomfortable as Neville's family expectations made him. "Gran keeps comparing me to my dad," Neville confided. "Says I don't have half his talent. She made me try to use his wand, but it doesn't work right for me." "That's because the wand chooses the wizard," Harry said, recalling Ollivander's words from a wand lore book he'd read. "You need your own wand, not your dad's." "Try telling Gran that," Neville sighed. In the kitchen, the adults' conversation had taken a serious turn, particularly after Crouch finally departed. "He's still pushing for restrictions," Remus told Dumbledore quietly. "Even with all Harry's progress. Barty has never been one to revise his opinions easily," Dumbledore replied. "His position isn't entirely unreasonable, viewed objectively. Harry's magical growth continues to exceed all precedents." "The boy needs proper training, not restraints," Augusta interjected. "I've watched him with Neville. Perfect control for his age, despite the raw power." "You're not concerned about Neville's safety?" Remus asked carefully. Augusta scoffed. "I fought in the war against Grindelwald, young man. I know dangerous magic when I see it. That boy in there isn't malicious, he's gifted. Besides," she added more softly, "Neville needs a friend who doesn't treat him like he's fragile. Frank and Alice's condition has left him isolated. As has Harry's reputation," Dumbledore agreed. A scratching at the back door interrupted them. Remus tensed, but Dumbledore merely smiled and waved his wand. The door opened to reveal a large black dog, who slipped inside and fixed intelligent gray eyes on the assembled adults. "What in Merlin's name?" Augusta began. "A friend," Dumbledore said simply. "One who has Harry's best interests at heart." The dog gave Augusta a look that seemed almost challenging, then trotted into the living room where the boys were talking. They heard Neville's startled exclamation, followed by Harry's reassurance, "It's okay, he's friendly." "You know who that is," Remus said to Dumbledore, not a question. "I have my suspicions," Dumbledore replied. "And I find myself increasingly inclined to revisit certain assumptions made 3 years ago." "Speak plainly," Augusta demanded. "In due time, Augusta. For now, let us simply observe that Harry has gained another protector, one who may have been wrongfully accused." Augusta's eyes narrowed shrewdly. "Black. Here. You're playing a dangerous game, Albus." "I prefer to think of it as correcting a grave injustice," Dumbledore said mildly. "But that discussion must wait for another day." In the living room, Padfoot had settled himself between the two boys, accepting ear scratches from a delighted Neville while keeping his body protectively close to Harry. "He showed up last night," Harry explained, deciding a partial truth was best. "Remus says he can stay as long as he behaves." "What's his name?" Neville asked. Harry hesitated briefly. "Padfoot. Weird name for a dog." "He's a weird dog," Harry grinned, receiving an indignant huff from Padfoot in response. The rest of the afternoon passed pleasantly. Augusta, despite her formidable appearance, proved to be an engaging storyteller, regaling the boys with tales of magical Britain from her youth. Dumbledore contributed occasional anecdotes about Harry's parents and the Longbottoms during their Hogwarts days, carefully edited for young ears. "Your mother was the brightest witch in her year," Dumbledore told Harry. "Professor Flitwick still speaks of her charms work withal. And James, well, he had a particular talent for transfiguration and, shall we say, creative applications of magic." "He means your dad was a prankster," Remus clarified with a smile. "He and Sirius used to drive the professors mad with their stunts." Padfoot gave a sound suspiciously like a chuckle, drawing a curious glance from Augusta. As evening approached, Augusta announced it was time for them to leave. "We've imposed on your hospitality long enough. Come, Neville." Neville looked disappointed but obediently stood to leave. "Can they come back?" Harry asked Remus hopefully. "Or maybe I could visit them sometime." The adults exchanged looks. "I think that could be arranged," Dumbledore said thoughtfully. With proper precautions, of course. The boy needs friends his own age, Augusta declared. And Neville could benefit from someone who might encourage him to show a bit more backbone. Gran, Neville protested weakly. It's true, child. You've enjoyed yourself more today than I've seen in months. A bit of Harry Potter's confidence might rub off on you. Harry, who had never thought of himself as particularly confident, looked surprised at this assessment. We'll coordinate through secure channels, Dumbledore told Augusta. Perhaps a visit to Longbottom Manor next month, when the Ministry's attention is focused on the International Confederation meetings. After the Longbottoms departed via Floo, and Dumbledore prepared to follow, he took Harry aside for a private word. I'm very proud of you today, Harry, he said, his blue eyes twinkling kindly. You showed remarkable control during Barty's tests, especially that last one. Finding the balance point in your magic is a significant breakthrough. Harry beamed at the praise. It felt different this time. Like my magic was listening to me instead of me wrestling with it. Exactly so. That harmony is what we've been working toward all these years. Dumbledore glanced toward Padfoot, who was pretending not to eavesdrop from across the room. I believe your new companion may prove beneficial to your progress as well. Dogs are known to have a calming effect. Harry bit back a smile at the twinkle in Dumbledore's eye. The old wizard clearly knew more than he was letting on. I'll see you again soon, my boy. Continue your exercises, and perhaps try some more complex magical constructs like that impressive Hogwarts model. Your fine control is developing nicely. After Dumbledore left, Remus prepared a birthday dinner that, while not elaborate, featured all of Harry's favorites. A small cake appeared afterward, with 7 candles that changed colors as they burned. Make a wish, Remus encouraged. Harry closed his eyes, thought carefully, then blew out the candles. To his surprise, they relit immediately. Trick candles, Remus explained with a grin. A Muggle invention, ironically enough. James used them on Sirius's cake one year, and he was convinced it was some complex charm he couldn't figure out. Padfoot made an indignant noise from under the table. Later, when Remus believed Harry was asleep, Sirius resumed his human form to speak with his old friend. Their voices drifted up to where Harry sat on the stairs, listening. He's amazing, Moony. James and Lily would be so proud. He is, Remus agreed. But I worry. The Ministry's scrutiny gets more intense every year, not less. Crouch is determined to find a reason to implement restrictions. Let him try, Sirius growled. I'd like to see him get past me. That's precisely what we don't need, you revealed and thrown back to Azkaban. Harry needs stability, Sirius. He's had precious little of it. What he needs is someone who'll fight for him, Sirius countered. You've done brilliantly, Remus, but you're too concerned with playing by rules set by people who've already decided Harry is dangerous. And you suggest we do what? Go on the run. Harry deserves a normal life. He'll never have a normal life, Sirius interrupted flatly. Not with his power, not with his fame, not with that bloody prophecy hanging over him. Harry's breath caught. Prophecy? What prophecy? Keep your voice down, Remus hissed. He doesn't know about that, and now isn't the time. When is the time? When the Ministry finally convinces the Wizengamot to slap magical restraints on him? When Voldemort returns, because we both know he will, and Harry's unprepared? He's 7 years old. He's James and Lily's son, Sirius said fiercely. He deserves the truth. And he's stronger than you give him credit for. Their voices lowered further, making it impossible for Harry to hear more without revealing himself. He crept back to bed, mind racing with questions. A prophecy about him? Voldemort returning? Was that why the Ministry watched him so closely, not just fear of his power, but some foreknowledge of what he might need to do with it? Sleep was long in coming. The next morning brought an unwelcome surprise. Harry and Remus were in the midst of breakfast when a ministry owl swooped through the window, dropping an official-looking letter on the table. Remus opened it with obvious trepidation, his face growing grimmer as he read. "What is it?" Harry asked. "Crouch's report to the Wizengamot," Remus said carefully. "He's requesting an emergency hearing next week to reconsider your status." "But I passed all the tests." "Yes, and that's part of his argument. Your magical output has increased by 22% since the last evaluation. He's suggesting that even with improved control, the raw power has reached potentially catastrophic levels if ever fully unleashed." Harry's appetite vanished. "They're going to put restraints on me, aren't they?" "Not if Dumbledore has anything to say about it," Remus assured him, though his voice lacked conviction. "And not if we can demonstrate how well you're managing your abilities." Sirius, who had been sleeping in dog form near the fireplace, transformed back to human with a scowl. "This is exactly what I was talking about. They're never going to stop trying to contain him." "What about the hearing?" Harry asked. "Will I have to go?" Remus nodded reluctantly. "I'm afraid so. But Dumbledore will be there, and I'll be with you the whole time." "And me," Sirius declared. "Absolutely not," Remus countered. "The ministry is crawling with people who would recognize you instantly. I'll stay as Padfoot. Harry's emotional support dog or something." "That's actually not a terrible idea," Harry said, perking up slightly. "Professor McGonagall told me once about therapy animals for people with magic-related anxiety." Remus looked between them, clearly torn. "It's too dangerous. If anyone realizes, I'll be careful," Sirius promised. "But I'm not letting Harry face the Wizengamot without every possible supporter in his corner." The week leading up to the hearing was tense. Harry doubled down on his control exercises, determined to prove to the Wizengamot that he wasn't a threat. Remus contacted Dumbledore, who began preparing a defense. And Sirius, when not practicing remaining calm in his dog form, shared stories about Harry's parents that seemed specifically chosen to build the boy's confidence. "Your mother once stood up to the entire Wizengamot," Sirius told him. "It was during the war, when they wanted to authorize Aurors to use unforgivable curses. She gave a speech about how becoming what we fight against means we've already lost. Half the chamber was in tears by the end." "Did she change their minds?" Harry asked. Sirius's expression darkened. "No. They authorized the curses anyway. But she showed incredible courage, standing by her principles even when it wasn't popular." "Like you're doing for me," Harry said quietly. "Even though it's dangerous." Sirius ruffled his hair affectionately. "Some things are worth the risk, kiddo." The night before the hearing, Harry couldn't sleep. His magic felt restless, responding to his anxiety despite all his calming exercises. Small objects in his room occasionally floated without his conscious direction. The glass of water on his bedside table boiled itself dry. Around midnight, he gave up trying and padded downstairs, hoping a cup of warm milk might help. To his surprise, he found Remus already in the kitchen, poring over legal documents. "Can't sleep either?" Remus asked without looking up. "My magic's all jumpy," Harry admitted, sliding onto a chair. "Keeps doing things without me meaning to." Remus finally looked up, his expression softening. "That's perfectly normal before something stressful. Even adult wizards experience magical fluctuations under pressure. What if it happens tomorrow? What if I accidentally do magic during the hearing? They'll definitely put restraints on me then. If you feel your magic building, tell me immediately," Remus instructed. "We've practiced the grounding techniques. They work, Harry, even when you're nervous." Harry nodded, though he didn't feel reassured. "Remus? What's the prophecy Sirius mentioned?" Remus froze, his face suddenly guarded. "You overheard that?" "Some of it. Is there really a prophecy about me? Does it say I'm dangerous?" Setting down his papers, Remus sighed deeply. This isn't a conversation I wanted to have at midnight before a crucial hearing. But I suppose you deserve some answers. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Yes, there is a prophecy involving you. No, it doesn't say you're dangerous, at least not to anyone who doesn't deserve it. What does it say, then? I don't know the exact wording. Few do. But it essentially marked you as the one with the power to defeat Voldemort permanently. Harry digested this. So that's why he came after my parents. Because of me? Remus nodded gravely. He learned part of the prophecy and decided to eliminate the threat you represented. But in attacking you, he fulfilled certain conditions within the prophecy itself. And the Ministry knows about this? Some officials do. It's one reason they watch you so closely. They fear your power because they know it must be formidable to fulfill the prophecy's requirements. Harry was silent for a long moment. Why didn't anyone tell me? You're 7, Harry. We wanted you to have some semblance of childhood before burdening you with this knowledge. But it's about me, Harry said, a hint of anger in his voice. Everyone's making decisions about me based on this prophecy, but nobody thought I should know. You're right, Remus conceded. We should have told you, or at least prepared to tell you soon. I'm sorry. The genuine regret in Remus's voice diffused Harry's anger. Does this mean Voldemort will come back? Sirius seemed sure of it. There are signs suggesting he's not truly gone. Dumbledore believes he found a way to prevent his complete death, though he's currently without a body or full power. And when he returns, I'm supposed to fight him. How? I can barely control my magic for Crouch's tests. By the time that happens, if it happens, you'll be older, trained, and prepared, Remus assured him. That's precisely why these years of learning control are so important. Harry suddenly understood so much more about his situation, why Dumbledore had been so involved in his care, why the Ministry monitored him so closely, why his magical education was so specialized. So tomorrow's hearing isn't really about whether I'm dangerous, he said slowly. It's about whether I'll be dangerous to the right people when the time comes. Remus looked startled by Harry's insight. That's remarkably perceptive. I'm 7, not stupid, Harry said with a hint of his godfather's characteristic cheek. A reluctant smile tugged at Remus's lips. Definitely James's son. He became serious again. But Harry, this information doesn't change our strategy for tomorrow. The Wizengamot will be evaluating your control, not your prophesied potential. I understand, Harry nodded. I won't mention the prophecy. Thank you. Remus stood, stretching. Now, how about that warm milk to help you sleep? Big day tomorrow. Later, back in bed with a stomach full of warm milk and honey, Harry lay awake thinking about prophecies and destinies. Everyone expected something from him, Dumbledore, the Ministry, even Sirius and Remus. They all watched him, waiting for him to either fulfill their hopes or confirm their fears. But what did he want? Simply to control his magic, to have friends like Neville, to learn about the world his parents had belonged to. To be normal, or as normal as possible for someone they called the most dangerous wizard alive. Tomorrow, he decided, he would show the Wizengamot exactly what kind of wizard he was becoming. Not dangerous, determined. The Ministry of Magic was even more intimidating the second time around. Harry, dressed in formal robes of deep green, kept close to Remus as they navigated the crowded atrium. Padfoot padded faithfully at his side, occasionally nudging Harry's hand reassuringly with his cold nose. People stopped to stare as they passed. Whispers followed them. That's him, Potter, the most dangerous wizard alive. Why is he allowed in public without restraints? Is that a therapy dog? Does he need it to control his magic? Harry kept his eyes forward, pretending not to hear. They met Dumbledore outside the Wizengamot chambers, the old wizard resplendent in formal purple robes with silver stars. Ready, my boy? Dumbledore asked kindly. Harry nodded, straightening his shoulders. Yes, sir. Remember, speak only when addressed directly. Answer truthfully but concisely. And if you feel your magic responding to your emotions, tell Remus immediately, Harry finished. I know. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. Indeed you do. Ah, and I see you've brought support. He nodded toward Padfoot, who wagged his tail once in acknowledgement. A wise precaution. The doors to the chamber swung open. Unlike the sparsely attended emergency session 3 years ago, today the Wizengamot was at full capacity. Witches and wizards in plum robes filled the tiered seats, and the gallery above was packed with spectators, including several people Harry recognized as reporters. Minister Bagnold presided, looking older and more careworn than Harry remembered. Beside her sat Barty Crouch Sr., his face set in its usual stern lines. To her other side was a toad-like woman with a simpering smile that didn't reach her eyes. In the center of the chamber stood a single chair, larger than the one from Harry's memory, but still intimidating in its isolation. Beside it, someone had placed a small cushion, presumably for Padfoot. Disciplinary hearing of the 7th of August, 1987, Minister Bagnold began formally. Evaluating the magical status of Harry James Potter, minor, age 7, currently under the guardianship of Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. Harry took his seat, Padfoot settling on the cushion beside him. Remus and Dumbledore remained standing nearby. The charges, Bagnold began. Point of order, Minister, Dumbledore interrupted politely. This is not a criminal proceeding. There are no charges. This is a status evaluation. Several Wizengamot members murmured in agreement. Bagnold looked slightly flustered. Yes, of course. The purpose of this hearing is to evaluate Mr. Potter's current magical control in light of Mr. Crouch's report suggesting potential public safety concerns. Crouch stood, his expression severe. Members of the Wizengamot, 1 week ago I conducted my quarterly evaluation of Mr. Potter's magical abilities. While his control has indeed improved, his raw magical output has increased by 22% since the previous assessment, a growth rate that far exceeds normal magical development. At his current trajectory, by the time he reaches magical maturity at 17, his unrestrained power could potentially equal that of Albus Dumbledore. Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber. Harry tried not to shrink in his seat, though the comparison to Dumbledore was startling even to him. Furthermore, Crouch continued, despite improved control techniques, Mr. Potter still experiences occasional episodes of accidental magic tied to strong emotions. Just last month, an incident resulted in all the glass in his residence shattering simultaneously. Harry flinched. That had been after a nightmare about the Dursleys. He'd woken up screaming, and before Remus could reach him, his magic had responded to his terror. In light of these findings, Crouch concluded, I recommend implementation of Class B magical monitoring and containment devices until Mr. Potter reaches Hogwarts age and can receive formal, structured magical education. The toad-like woman beside the minister leaned forward. If I may, Minister. Dolores Umbridge, Senior Undersecretary. I believe Mr. Crouch is being overly generous. Given the demonstrated power levels, Class A restrictions would be more appropriate. Class A restrictions are reserved for convicted criminals and dangerous magical creatures, Dumbledore objected, his voice sharp despite its outward calm. Mr. Potter is neither. He is, however, classified as magically volatile, Umbridge countered with a simpering smile. A designation that calls for the strongest possible safeguards. Padfoot growled low in his throat. Harry placed a calming hand on his head, though he shared the sentiment. Perhaps, said a witch Harry recognized as Amelia Bones, we should hear from Mr. Potter himself before making such determinations. Young man, how would you describe your current relationship with your magic? All eyes turned to Harry. He swallowed hard, remembering Remus's coaching. It's getting easier to control, he said clearly. When I was little, my magic felt separate from me, like it had its own ideas. Now it feels more like an extension of myself. I can direct it, shape it. He hesitated, then added, I haven't had an accidental magical outburst in public for over a year. Yet the incident Mr. Crouch described, the broken windows, occurred in your home, Umbridge pointed out. After a nightmare, Harry explained. And I contained it to just one room. Before, it might have affected the whole house. Nightmares, Umbridge repeated with artificial concern. About what, I wonder? Violent content, perhaps. Disturbing impulses. Padfoot's growl grew louder. Dumbledore stepped forward. Madam Umbridge, I must object to this line of questioning. Mr. Potter's nightmares, like many children's, stem from past trauma, specifically, the abusive environment of his Muggle relatives and the night his parents were murdered. To suggest they indicate violent tendencies is both cruel and misleading. The chamber fell silent at the mention of abuse. Many members looked uncomfortable, while others appeared skeptical. Is this true, Mr. Potter? Madam Bones asked gently. Were you mistreated by your Muggle relatives? Harry nodded, not trusting himself to speak about the Dursleys without his magic reacting. Padfoot pressed against his leg supportively. And yet, came a new voice, smooth and cultured, we must consider whether such treatment might have destabilizing effects on a wizard of Mr. Potter's potential. Harry looked up to see Lucius Malfoy, not in Wizengamot robes but standing in the gallery, his long blonde hair gleaming in the torchlight. Mr. Malfoy is not a member of this body, Remus objected. But he raises a valid point, Crouch countered. Childhood trauma is known to affect magical development. In extreme cases, it can create an obscurial. Horrified murmurs swept the chamber. Harry had no idea what an obscurial was, but from the reactions, it was clearly something terrible. Harry is not an obscurial, Dumbledore stated firmly. He has never repressed his magic. On the contrary, he has been encouraged to understand and embrace it, but with appropriate guidance and boundaries. Which brings us back to the question of those boundaries, Minister Bagnold interjected. Mr. Crouch has recommended Class B restrictions. Madam Umbridge suggests Class A. Are there alternative proposals? An elderly wizard stood. What about a modified trace? The standard trace only detects underage magic in Muggle areas, but a specialized version could monitor magical output levels without actively restricting the boy's abilities. Insufficient, Crouch declared. A trace merely detects magic after it's performed. It cannot prevent dangerous outbursts. Neither can your Class B restrictions, Dumbledore pointed out. They merely dampen magic, which in Mr. Potter's case could actually increase the risk of uncontrolled releases when the dampening temporarily fails, as all such devices occasionally do. The debate continued, becoming increasingly technical. Harry found it harder to follow as various magical monitoring and restraining methods were discussed as if he weren't present. His anxiety grew, and with it, a familiar warmth in his chest. Remus, noticing Harry's distress, moved closer. Breathe, he whispered. Center yourself. Harry tried, but the continuing argument, essentially about whether to treat him as a dangerous magical artifact, made it difficult to maintain calm. The warmth spread to his fingertips. Beside him, Padfoot whined softly in concern. Then, just as Harry felt his control slipping, the chamber doors burst open. Augusta Longbottom swept in, Neville trailing nervously behind her. I demand the right to address this body regarding Harry Potter, she announced without preamble. Minister Bagnold looked startled. Madam Longbottom, this is an official hearing, to which I should have been invited, as a member of the Wizengamot and as someone who has recently spent time evaluating the boy's character and abilities firsthand. Augusta's tone brooked no argument. Or did you deliberately exclude those who might speak in his favor? The accusation hung in the air. Several Wizengamot members shifted uncomfortably. We would welcome your perspective, Dumbledore said smoothly, as someone who has observed Mr. Potter in a social context rather than a clinical one. Augusta nodded curtly and approached the center of the chamber. To Harry's surprise, she guided Neville forward as well. My grandson and I spent several hours with Mr. Potter last week, she began. During that time, I observed a courteous, well-spoken child with remarkable magical control for his age. Yes, his power is substantial, but so is his restraint. She turned to Neville. Tell them what happened with the plant, child. Neville swallowed hard, clearly terrified to address the Wizengamot, but managed to speak. I brought a cutting from my fanged geranium to show Harry. But I dropped it, and it started to wither immediately. Harry used his magic to create a little bubble of water and light around it, keeping it alive until we could pot it properly. Fine control, Augusta emphasized. Gentle enough to nurture a delicate plant cutting, precise enough to create exactly the right environment. Does that sound like a dangerous wizard to you? The chamber was silent, many members now looking thoughtfully at Harry. One isolated example, Crouch began. Is worth more than 100 clinical tests, Augusta interrupted firmly. You evaluate the boy like a specimen, Barty. I evaluated him as a person. And I found him to be exactly what we should hope for, a powerful young wizard learning to use his gifts responsibly. She placed a hand on Neville's shoulder. My grandson lost his parents to dark magic. If I had any reason to believe Harry Potter presented a similar threat, I would never allow Neville near him. Instead, I encouraged their friendship, because what Harry needs isn't restraints, but normal childhood experiences to balance his extraordinary abilities. Harry felt a surge of gratitude toward the formidable old witch. Beside him, Padfoot's tail wagged slightly. Madame Bones spoke up. What would you recommend, Augusta? Continued monitoring, certainly. Regular evaluations by a panel of experts, not just one official with preconceived notions. She shot Crouch a stern look. Educational opportunities with qualified tutors. And, most importantly, social interaction with magical children his age. Isolation only breeds the very instability you fear. The Wizengamot members began conferring among themselves. Minister Bagnold called for a brief recess to consider the testimony. As the officials filed out, Neville approached Harry hesitantly. Sorry if we were late. Gran only found out about the hearing this morning. You were brilliant, Harry told him sincerely. Both of you. Thank you. Neville blushed. I was terrified. But Gran said sometimes you have to stand up for what's right, even when it's scary. She's amazing, Harry agreed, watching as Augusta engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with Crouch across the chamber. When the Wizengamot reconvened 30 minutes later, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Minister Bagnold looked less severe, and several members who had appeared hostile earlier now seemed thoughtful. After careful consideration, Bagnold announced, the Wizengamot has reached a decision regarding Harry Potter's magical status. Harry held his breath. Padfoot pressed against his leg supportively. Mr. Potter will remain classified as magically volatile, due to his exceptional power levels. However, she continued as Harry's heart sank, we find insufficient evidence that his current control methods are inadequate for public safety. Harry's head snapped up in surprise. Instead of restrictive devices, we mandate the following. First, continuation of specialized training under approved tutors. Second, quarterly evaluations by a panel of 3 qualified officials, not a single evaluator. Third, implementation of an enhanced trace that will alert authorities only in cases of dangerous magical surges, not routine practice or minor accidental magic. She paused, then added, additionally, we approve supervised social integration with magical children, as suggested by Madame Longbottom. Isolation is indeed counterproductive to stable magical development. Relief flooded through Harry. No restraints. No treating him like a dangerous creature. Just monitoring and continued training, things he was already doing. The panel of evaluators will consist of Bartemius Crouch Sr., Amelia Bones, and Bagnold hesitated briefly, Albus Dumbledore, as Mr. Potter's magical guardian. Crouch looked displeased but didn't object. Umbridge, however, was visibly fuming. This decision will be reviewed annually, with the first comprehensive assessment prior to Mr. Potter's admission to Hogwarts. Bagnold struck her gavel. Hearing adjourned. As people began filing out, many still discussing the surprising outcome, Dumbledore approached Harry with twinkling eyes. "Well done, my boy. Your composure throughout was exemplary." "I didn't really do anything," Harry said. "Madame Longbottom and Neville did all the talking." "Sometimes knowing when to let others speak on your behalf is wisdom, not weakness," Dumbledore observed. "And your magic remained controlled despite obvious stress. That speaks volumes about your progress." Augusta joined them, Neville still at her side. "Well, that's settled for now. Though I expect Crouch will be back with more objections before long." "Undoubtedly," Dumbledore agreed. "But today's decision creates an important precedent. Harry is to be educated, not restrained." Harry looked up at Augusta. "Thank you for coming. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." "Nonsense, child. I merely stated what any objective observer would see." She patted his shoulder awkwardly. "Besides, Neville has been talking non-stop about visiting you again. Wouldn't want his new friend locked away in some ministry containment program, would we?" Neville blushed again but smiled at Harry. "Gran says maybe you can visit us next time. I could show you my greenhouse." "I'd like that," Harry said sincerely. As they prepared to leave, Remus keeping Padfoot close as they navigated the still crowded ministry, Dumbledore held Harry back momentarily. "There is one thing you should know," he said quietly. "During the recess, I had a rather interesting conversation with Minister Bagnold. She mentioned receiving an anonymous letter this morning, a letter containing memories of your life with the Dursleys and your progress since." "Anonymous?" Harry frowned. "Who would send something like that?" Dumbledore's eyes twinkled mysteriously. "Someone with access to such memories, obviously. Someone who perhaps wished to balance the scales before today's hearing." He glanced meaningfully at Padfoot, who was studiously examining a nearby statue. "But how would?" Harry began, then understood. "Oh. Indeed. Quite resourceful, wouldn't you say? And quite timely, as it seems to have softened the minister's position considerably." Dumbledore straightened. "Now, I believe a celebration is in order. Successfully navigating one's first full Wizengamot hearing is something of a milestone, after all." That evening, back at the cottage, Harry enjoyed a feast prepared by Remus with help from Hogwarts house elves. Sirius, now in human form, raised a glass of butterbeer in toast to Harry, who faced down the entire Wizengamot and won. "To friends who stand up for each other," Harry countered, smiling at Neville, who had been permitted to join the celebration before returning home with his grandmother. "And to guardians who resort to slightly dubious tactics when necessary," Remus added dryly, giving Sirius a knowing look. Sirius adopted an expression of exaggerated innocence. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean. I'm just a dog, remember." "A dog who somehow extracted specific memories and sent them anonymously to the Minister of Magic," Remus said. "Don't think Dumbledore didn't tell me." "Actually," Augusta interjected, "he had help with that." She smiled thinly at their surprised expressions. "I may be old, but I still have connections at the ministry. When Black approached me, yes, I recognized you immediately. Don't look so shocked. I saw an opportunity to ensure fair treatment for Harry." "You knew who I was and didn't turn me in?" Sirius asked incredulously. "I knew Frank and Alice spoke highly of you. I knew something never sat right about your case. And I know a man devoted to his godson when I see one." She sipped her tea. "Besides, I've never been particularly impressed with the ministry's idea of justice." Harry, listening to this exchange, felt a surge of gratitude for these adults who had gone to such lengths to protect him. His entire life, he'd been labeled, freak, dangerous, volatile. But here, in this moment, he was simply Harry, a boy with friends, with guardians who loved him, with a future that seemed a little brighter after today. "I think it's time I started learning more advanced magic," he announced suddenly. "Not just control exercises, but actual spells and theory." The adults looked at him in surprise. "You're still quite young," Remus began cautiously. "But my magic isn't," Harry countered. "And after everything I learned this week, about the prophecy, about what people expect from me, I need to be prepared." Sirius shot Remus a sharp look. "You told him about the prophecy?" "He overheard us talking," Remus admitted. "I thought it better to explain than leave him with half-truths." "Good," Sirius said firmly. "No more secrets." He turned to Harry. "If you want more advanced training, pup, I'm all for it. I know some pretty impressive magic myself, you know. Most of it designed for pranking Slytherins," Remus muttered. "Hey, some of those pranks required incredibly complex spellwork." Harry laughed, the sound causing the nearby candles to flare slightly brighter in response to his happiness. He quickly controlled the reaction, but not before Neville noticed. "That happens to me too sometimes," the round-faced boy admitted quietly. "Not as dramatically, but plants grow faster when I'm really happy. Gran says it's because magic responds to strong emotions." "Exactly right," Augusta confirmed. "All magical children experience this. Harry's case is simply more pronounced. Which is why continued training is essential," Dumbledore added, joining the conversation. "And I agree with Harry, it's time to expand beyond basic control exercises. Perhaps a more formal curriculum, with specialized tutors in various magical disciplines. Like an early Hogwarts education?" Harry asked eagerly. "Similar, though adapted to your unique needs and abilities," Dumbledore explained. "We'll start with charms and transfiguration, subjects where precision and control are paramount. Later, we can add potions, magical theory, and perhaps some basic defense against the dark arts." "Definitely defense," Sirius insisted. "Considering who's after him." "Who's after Harry?" Neville asked, confused. An awkward silence fell. Harry, sensing Neville's discomfort at being suddenly excluded, made a decision. "Voldemort," he said clearly, ignoring the adult's winces at the name. "Everyone thinks he's gone, but he's not. Not completely. And there's a prophecy that says I'm the one who can defeat him permanently." "Harry!" Remus exclaimed. "That's not information to share lightly." "Neville's my friend," Harry said firmly. "And his parents fought against Voldemort too. He deserves to know why this all matters." Neville had gone pale, but there was something like understanding in his eyes. "Is that why they call you dangerous? Because you have to be powerful enough to defeat him?" Harry nodded. "I think so. At least partly." "Then." Neville swallowed hard. "Then I want to learn too. Not just regular magic, but how to help. If Harry has to fight him someday, he shouldn't do it alone." Augusta's stern features softened as she looked at her grandson with something like pride. "Well said, Neville. Perhaps," Dumbledore said thoughtfully, "we might arrange occasional joint lessons. Mr. Longbottom shows promise in herbology already, according to Professor Sprout's assessment. That knowledge could complement Harry's strengths nicely." Harry grinned at Neville, who looked both terrified and thrilled by this suggestion. "Partners?" he offered. Neville nodded firmly, some of his usual shyness falling away. "Partners." Later that night, after the guests had departed and Sirius had transformed back into Padfoot for safety, Harry sat by his bedroom window, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The day had brought revelations, challenges, and unexpected allies. The Ministry would continue watching him, the enhanced trace would make sure of that, but he'd avoided the restraints Crouch had been pushing for. More importantly, he had a clear path forward now: advanced training, a true friend in Neville, and adults who would fight to give him as normal a life as possible. He held out his hand in the moonlight, summoning a small ball of magical light to hover above his palm, a simple exercise he'd mastered years ago. But now, with his newfound understanding of balance, he shaped the light differently, molding it like clay until it formed a tiny stag, prancing on his hand. His father's animagus form, according to Sirius. The stag galloped in circles, leaving trails of light behind it, before dissolving back into formless energy that Harry allowed to dissipate gently. No explosions. No loss of control. Just intent, direction, and harmony with his magic. Maybe, Harry thought, the most dangerous wizard alive wasn't such a terrible title after all, not if it meant he could someday protect the people he cared about. Not if it meant he could fulfill the prophecy and ensure Voldemort never harmed anyone again. He just hoped he'd be ready when the time came. Lucius Malfoy was not pleased as he entered the drawing room of Malfoy Manor. The Wizengamot hearing had not gone as planned. Despite Crouch's insistence and his own subtle influence, Potter had escaped restrictions yet again. "I take it things did not proceed as anticipated," came a soft, sibilant voice from the shadows of the room. Malfoy controlled his instinctive flinch. He still wasn't accustomed to his guest and the unnatural presence he projected. There were complications, Malfoy admitted carefully. Augusta Longbottom intervened. And Dumbledore was more prepared than expected. The boy's power grows, then. Yes. Crouch's measurements confirm it. By the time he reaches majority, Potter could rival Dumbledore himself. A hissing sound that might have been laughter emanated from the shadows. How convenient. Malfoy frowned. "My lord, surely this is concerning. If the Potter boy reaches his full potential, then he becomes an even more valuable vessel," the voice interrupted. "Our plans merely require adjustment, not abandonment." From the darkest corner of the room, something shifted, a form that was neither fully corporeal nor completely spectral. Red eyes gleamed in the darkness. "Continue monitoring the boy. His training, his associations, his weaknesses. When the time comes, all that power will serve us well." Malfoy bowed low, suppressing a shudder. "Yes, my lord." "And Lucius? Find Pettigrew. The time approaches when I will need a more substantial form. The rat has hidden long enough." As Malfoy left the room, Lord Voldemort, or what remained of him, contemplated the unexpected development of Harry Potter's growing abilities. The prophecy had marked the boy as his equal. How fitting that the child's power was proving to be so extraordinary. When the time came to claim that power for himself, it would be all the sweeter for the waiting. Meanwhile, in the Department of Mysteries, deep within the Ministry of Magic, an unspeakable studied a record of magical output readings from Harry Potter's evaluation. The numbers were unlike anything in their archives, not merely strong, but structured differently at a fundamental level. "Still hard at work, Rookwood?" a colleague asked, passing by the research station. "Just reviewing the Potter data," Augustus Rookwood replied casually. "Fascinating case." "Dangerous, you mean? Did you see today's hearing results? No restrictions at all. Dumbledore's influence at work, obviously." Rookwood made a noncommittal noise as his colleague continued down the hall. Once alone, he carefully duplicated the readings and slipped them into his robe. His master would find this information most valuable, particularly the strange resonance pattern that appeared when Potter's magical signature was compared to another stored in their archives. The Dark Lord's own magical signature, recorded during the height of the war. The similarities were subtle but unmistakable. And potentially world-changing, in the right hands. Chapter 3, The Choice. The mountain sanctuary looked different in summer light. Wildflowers dotted the highlands surrounding the stone cottage, their colors vibrant against the green landscape. Inside, 11-year-old Harry Potter sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by a perfect sphere of hovering objects, books, quills, chess pieces, and even a teapot complete with steaming tea. "Impressive," Remus noted, leaning against the doorframe. "But you're showing off." Harry grinned without breaking his concentration. With subtle movements of his fingers, he orchestrated the floating items into a complex orbital pattern, like a miniature solar system with himself at the center. McGonagall said to practice simultaneous levitation with objects of different weights and materials, he pointed out. I'm just being thorough. And the rotating tea service? Was that in her instructions too? Creative interpretation. A large black dog padded into the room, observed the floating display, and promptly jumped through a gap in the orbiting objects to land directly in Harry's lap. Pad foot. Harry protested as his concentration shattered. The hovering items wobbled but didn't fall, instead, they gently lowered themselves to the floor in perfect order. I almost had 10 minutes that time. The dog transformed into Sirius Black, who now sat cross-legged opposite his godson with a mischievous grin. Age and proper nutrition had restored him to something closer to his former handsome self, though Azkaban had left permanent shadows in his eyes. 10 minutes of showing off is 9 minutes too many, he said. Besides, your Hogwarts letter arrived. Harry's eyes widened. Really? Where? Kitchen table. Been there 20 minutes while you played with your magic mobile. Harry scrambled up and raced to the kitchen, where a thick envelope of yellowish parchment sat innocuously beside the morning's Daily Prophet. The familiar emerald green ink addressed it to, Mr. H. Potter, the second-bedroom Highland Sanctuary Cottage, unplottable location, Scotland. With slightly trembling fingers, Harry broke the purple wax seal bearing the Hogwarts crest. The moment felt momentous despite its inevitability. After years of specialized tutoring and quarterly ministry evaluations, the question had never been whether Harry would receive a letter, but whether he would be allowed to attend like any normal student. The letter inside was standard, exactly like the sample Remus had shown him years ago. An acceptance to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, a request for an owl by July 31st, and a list of required supplies. But tucked behind this familiar document was a second letter, written in a different hand. Dear Mr. Potter, given your unique educational circumstances and official classification status, your attendance at Hogwarts will require a special review by the Hogwarts Board of Governors and Ministry representatives. Please present yourself at Hearing Room 3, Ministry of Magic, on July 30th at 10 a.m. to discuss accommodations and requirements for your enrollment. Your magical guardian should accompany you. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Still making things complicated, aren't they? Sirius remarked, reading over Harry's shoulder. Did you expect anything else? Harry asked, trying to hide his disappointment. After 7 years of being labeled the most dangerous wizard alive, he'd hoped, foolishly, perhaps, that his Hogwarts letter might be normal. Remus joined them, scanning both letters quickly. We anticipated this. Dumbledore warned us the board would insist on a hearing. I know, Harry sighed. I just thought, maybe, that your extraordinary power, unprecedented control achievements, and status as the boy who lived and then destroyed a house would be overlooked. Sirius finished with gentle sarcasm. Not likely, pup. Harry couldn't help but smile at Sirius's bluntness. His godfather never sugar-coated things, which Harry had come to appreciate over the years. At least it's a hearing, not a rejection, Remus pointed out. And Dumbledore chairs the Board of Governors. He won't let them exclude you. Harry nodded, forcing optimism. Maybe they just want to establish some reasonable precautions. I can handle that. The truth was, despite years of specialized training and vastly improved control, Harry still occasionally experienced magical surges tied to strong emotions. Just last month, he'd accidentally caused a brief localized rainstorm inside the cottage after an argument with Sirius. His wandless abilities had also grown rather than diminished with age, something that both fascinated and alarmed his various ministry evaluators. Amelia Bones, now head of magical law enforcement and one of Harry's quarterly assessors, had once remarked that Harry performed wandlessly at 13-year-old levels despite being only 10 at the time. Crouch, of course, had seen this as further evidence of Harry's dangerous potential, while Dumbledore had merely twinkled and called it promising. When should we tell Neville? Harry asked, thoughts turning to his best friend. His letter must have arrived today too. We'll call this evening, Remus suggested. Augusta usually keeps mornings clear for correspondence. And we should contact Dumbledore, Sirius added. If this hearing is on the 30th, we need to coordinate strategy. Harry looked between his guardians with a wry smile. You know, most kids just get excited about their Hogwarts letter. They don't immediately start planning defense strategies. Most kids don't have the Ministry watching their every magical hiccup, Sirius countered. And most kids haven't been trained by the finest minds in magical Britain since age 4, Remus added more gently. You've earned your place at Hogwarts, Harry. This hearing is just a formality. Harry hoped Remus was right, but years of Ministry scrutiny had taught him caution. The enhanced trace placed on him after the Wizengamot hearing 4 years ago meant that any significant magical discharge was instantly detected and recorded. While this had mostly proven his increasing control, major accidental magic incidents had become rare. It also created a detailed record of his magical development that the Ministry studied with unsettling intensity. Will Crouch be there? Harry asked, unable to keep the distaste from his voice. Likely, Remus admitted. But he's lost influence over the years. His stance on you has become increasingly isolated as your control has improved. And his son's involvement with Death Eaters didn't help his reputation, Sirius added darkly. Harry nodded, remembering the scandal 3 years earlier when Bartemius Crouch Jr. had been exposed as a Death Eater involved in an attack on Frank and Alice Longbottom. The revelation had significantly diminished Crouch Sr.'s political standing, though he remained stubbornly fixated on Harry's containment. Well, Harry said, squaring his shoulders with determination, I've convinced them to leave me unrestricted for 7 years. One more hearing won't change anything. He looked again at the Hogwarts letter, the standard one, the normal one, and allowed himself to feel the excitement that had initially been dampened by the second letter. Despite everything, he was going to Hogwarts. The place his parents had learned magic. The place where, perhaps, he might finally find some semblance of normalcy. Or at least, as normal as life could be for the most dangerous wizard alive. They can't seriously expect you to wear these, Sirius growled, glaring at the silver bracelets laid out on the table in Hearing Room 3. Harry stared at the innocuous-looking bands. Despite their ordinary appearance, he recognized them from descriptions in his magical theory books, dampening cuffs designed to restrict the flow of magic from a wizard's core to their extremities. Essentially magical handcuffs, though without the physical restraint component. Just as a precaution during large gatherings, Lucius Malfoy explained smoothly. The Great Hall at full capacity, Quidditch matches, situations where emotional responses might trigger unintended magical discharges. The hearing had begun cordially enough. Dumbledore presiding as Chief Warlock, representatives from the Hogwarts Board of Governors seated to one side, Ministry officials including Crouch and Amelia Bones on the other. Harry, accompanied by Remus, officially, and a large black dog, unofficially, had answered standard questions about his educational background, magical control techniques, and expectations for Hogwarts. Then Malfoy had produced the bracelets. These are Class B magical restraints, Bones noted with a frown. Typically reserved for magical creatures being transported or wizards awaiting trial for violent magical offenses. Hardly appropriate for a student, regardless of power level. Modified Class B, Malfoy corrected. Designed specifically for Mr. Potter's unique situation. They would activate only when his magic exceeds certain thresholds, not constantly. Absolutely not, Dumbledore said, his voice pleasant but firm. As I have maintained for 7 years, magical restraints would interfere with Harry's continued development of natural control. They would be counterproductive at best, potentially dangerous at worst. The boy destroyed an entire house with accidental magic, Crouch interjected. His power has only grown since then. What happens when an 11-year-old with that capability has a tantrum in the Great Hall? Harry, who hadn't had an actual tantrum since he was about 5, bit back a retort. Remus placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. If I may, Harry said instead, keeping his voice measured. I haven't had a major accidental magic incident in over 2 years. My enhanced trace records confirm this. When I do experience surges, they're contained and minor, certainly nothing approaching the level of danger Mr. Crouch suggests. Convenient records, Malfoy murmured. Monitored in isolation, with few witnesses. The implication that Harry's progress reports had been falsified hung in the air. Padfoot growled low in his throat from beneath Harry's chair. Are you questioning the integrity of Ministry evaluators, Lucius? Bones asked sharply. Because I've personally conducted many of those assessments. Malfoy inclined his head apologetically. Not at all, Madam Bones. Merely suggesting that controlled environments differ significantly from the chaos of school life. Perhaps, said a witch Harry recognized as Griselda Marchbanks from the Wizarding Examinations Authority, we might consider a compromise. Mr. Potter clearly deserves the opportunity to attend Hogwarts normally. His control has improved remarkably according to all official reports. However, legitimate concerns exist about unprecedented magical situations. What sort of compromise? Dumbledore inquired, though his expression suggested wariness. A probationary first term, Marchbanks proposed. Without restraints but with enhanced monitoring. Private accommodations rather than dormitory housing, at least initially. And perhaps a specialized faculty mentor beyond the normal head-of-house relationship. Harry considered this. Private accommodations weren't ideal if he wanted to make friends, but far better than magical handcuffs. I would be willing to accept those terms, he said before anyone else could respond. Though I'd like the option to integrate into standard dormitories after proving myself. Several committee members looked surprised at his mature response. Harry had learned years ago that taking initiative in these situations often prevented others from imposing worse restrictions. A reasonable approach, Dumbledore agreed, eyes twinkling approvingly at Harry. And as for a faculty mentor, I believe Professor Flitwick would be ideal. As a charms master, he understands magical control techniques better than most, and he's already familiar with Harry's abilities from previous tutoring sessions. Crouch looked displeased but outnumbered. Malfoy's expression remained inscrutable as he returned the silver bracelets to a velvet-lined box. There is one additional matter, Dumbledore continued. Harry's wand situation. This was a complication they'd anticipated. Though Harry had trained with a specialized practice wand for years, his actual attempts with standard wands had proven problematic. His magic simply overwhelmed them, causing everything from minor malfunctions to, in one memorable instance, a wand literally exploding in his hand. Ollivander must match him like any other student, a governor insisted. Of course, Dumbledore agreed. However, Mr. Ollivander may need to consider unconventional materials given Harry's unique magical signature. I've taken the liberty of consulting with him already. More special treatment, Crouch muttered. More appropriate accommodation, Bones corrected firmly. We don't force left-handed students to write with their right hands, nor should we force an extraordinarily powerful wizard to use inadequate tools. After another hour of discussion covering everything from Harry's class schedule to emergency protocols in case of magical incidents, the hearing concluded with a verdict: Harry Potter would attend Hogwarts as a regular first-year student, with modified accommodations for his first term and quarterly progress reviews. A successful outcome, Remus remarked as they left the ministry, Padfoot trotting beside them. Better than we'd hoped, honestly. Harry nodded, though part of him still chafed at the special monitoring and separate accommodations. I just want to be normal. Normal is overrated, came Sirius's voice as they reached a secluded alley where he could safely transform back to human form. Your dad always said that. Easy for you to say, Harry retorted. You weren't called the most dangerous wizard alive, before you'd even learned to read. No, but the Blacks have our own reputation, Sirius countered, straightening his robes. Everyone expected me to be a proper pure-blood Slytherin. Instead, I became the family disappointment and proud Gryffindor. What Sirius is trying to say, Remus translated, is that people will always have expectations. Your choice is whether to let them define you. Harry considered this. 7 years of ministry scrutiny, specialized training, and newspaper speculation had certainly created a specific image of Harry Potter in the wizarding world's mind. But Hogwarts represented a chance to establish his own identity among peers who would judge him by his actions, not just his reputation. I suppose I get to decide what kind of wizard I actually am, Harry said slowly. Not dangerous or safe. Just, me. Exactly, Sirius agreed, ruffling Harry's perpetually messy hair. Now, who's ready for ice cream? Hearings always make me hungry. Harry laughed, the tension of the morning dissipating. When aren't you hungry? Azkaban diet, Sirius quipped with gallows humor. Still making up for lost meals. As they headed toward Diagon Alley for a celebratory treat, Harry felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The hearing had gone well. Hogwarts awaited. And for the first time in years, the path ahead seemed to hold more promise than restrictions. Diagon Alley bustled with pre-Hogwarts shopping activity. Families crowded the narrow street, laden with packages from Flourish and Blots, Madame Malkin's, and the apothecary. Harry, walking between Remus and Sirius, disguised with a glamour charm that altered his features just enough to avoid recognition, felt simultaneously excited and overwhelmed. Despite visits to wizarding locations over the years, Harry had rarely experienced crowds like this. His training had typically occurred in isolated locations, and his few public appearances had been carefully managed. The press of magical energy from so many witches and wizards in one place created a background hum that Harry could sense in a way most couldn't, another unusual aspect of his magical sensitivity. Holding up okay? Remus asked quietly, noticing Harry's slightly tense posture. Fine, Harry assured him. Just, a lot of people. We can take breaks if needed, Sirius said. No rush to get everything today. I'm really okay, Harry insisted. Just adjusting. They tackled the school list methodically, robes from Madame Malkin's, where Harry endured being measured alongside a pointy-faced blonde boy who seemed oddly familiar, books from Flourish and Blots, where Harry added several advanced texts to his required first-year materials, and supplies from various other shops. They saved Ollivander's for last. The narrow wand shop appeared exactly as Remus had described it, dusty, ancient, with that distinctive atmosphere of contained magical power. The bell tinkled softly as they entered, and Harry immediately felt the resonance of thousands of wands responding to his magical presence. Several boxes on nearby shelves actually vibrated slightly. Curious, came a soft voice as Ollivander emerged from the shadows. Most curious indeed. His silvery eyes fixed on Harry with unsettling intensity. I've been expecting you, Mr. Potter. A most unusual case. Sir. Harry responded, uncertain how to address the wandmaker's cryptic greeting. 7 years since the incident at Privet Drive, Ollivander continued, circling Harry slowly. 7 years of specialized training. And now, finally, ready for a proper wand, if one will have you. Harry blinked at the strange phrasing. If one will have me. Wands choose the wizard, Mr. Potter. But when the wizard's magic is unconventional, the choice becomes more complex. Ollivander turned to Remus and the disguised Sirius. The practice wand served its purpose. Very well, Remus confirmed. Though Harry outgrew its capacity some time ago. As expected. Training wands are not meant to channel the full magical potential of a wizard, merely to provide structure for early learning. Ollivander's attention returned to Harry. Your right arm, if you please. Harry extended his arm, and Ollivander produced a measuring tape that began taking measurements on its own, arm length, finger width, height, even the distance between his eyes. Professor Dumbledore consulted me about your case, Ollivander remarked as he began selecting boxes from the shelves. Most enlightening conversation. We discussed certain adaptations that might be necessary. Harry nodded, having been briefed on this. Standard wands simply couldn't handle his magical output without burning out or misfiring dangerously. Try this first, Ollivander suggested, opening a box to reveal a dark, almost black wand. Ebony and dragon heartstring, 13 inches, unusually rigid. One of my more robust creations. Harry hesitantly took the wand. Immediately, he felt his magic surge toward it, like water rushing through a pipe too narrow to contain it. The wand grew hot in his hand, and Ollivander swiftly plucked it away before anything could happen. No, certainly not, the wandmaker muttered. Too restrictive. 5 more wands followed with similar results, each connecting with Harry's magic but unable to channel it properly. One emitted a fountain of uncontrolled sparks that singed the ceiling. Another vibrated so violently it nearly jumped from his grasp. Challenging, Ollivander commented, though he seemed more fascinated than frustrated. Let us try a different approach. He disappeared into the back of the shop, returning with 3 boxes different from the others, longer, with strange symbols carved into their lids. These contain experimental designs, Ollivander explained. Wands created for specific magical conditions rather than general use. Rarely needed, but occasionally. Well, occasionally a wizard comes along who requires something exceptional. The first experimental wand, Willow with a dual core of phoenix feather and unicorn hair, responded better than previous attempts but still felt constricting to Harry, like trying to breathe through a straw. The second, Blackthorn with dragon heartstring wrapped in phoenix feather, created an impressive shower of gold and silver sparks, but Ollivander shook his head. Better, but still not right. The connection is forced, not natural. Finally, Ollivander opened the third box with reverent care. Inside lay a wand unlike any Harry had seen, pale holly wood with a subtle, spiraling pattern running its length, and an unusual hilt-like formation near the base. Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, with a structural enhancement I developed specifically for cases of exceptional power. The core has been treated with a special process to allow greater magical flow without compromising stability. Harry reached for it, and the moment his fingers touched the wood, he knew. Warmth spread up his arm, not the uncomfortable heat of the previous wands but a gentle, welcoming sensation. The wand emitted not sparks but a soft, sustained golden glow that illuminated the entire shop. Yes, Ollivander whispered. Curious, most curious. What's curious? Harry asked, still marveling at the perfect connection he felt with the wand, like finding a piece of himself he hadn't known was missing. I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single wand. And it so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather resides in your wand gave another feather, just one other. It is curious that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar. Harry's hand instinctively rose to the lightning-shaped mark on his forehead. Voldemort's wand? Ollivander flinched at the name but nodded. The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter. I think we can expect great things from you. After all, he who must not be named did great things, terrible, yes, but great. An uncomfortable silence followed this pronouncement, broken by Sirius clearing his throat. How much for the wand? 7 galleons, Ollivander replied, still watching Harry intently. And a promise, Mr. Potter. A promise? That you will respect its power. This wand is uniquely suited to channel magic of extraordinary force. Use it wisely. Harry nodded solemnly. I will, sir. As they left the shop, Harry couldn't stop examining his new wand, marveling at how right it felt in his hand compared to the practice wand he'd used for years. The connection was so natural, so complete, that it hardly felt like a separate object at all. Happy with your choice? Remus asked, noting Harry's fascination. It's perfect, Harry said. Like it's been waiting for me. According to Ollivander, it has been, Sirius remarked. Though the connection to Voldemort's wand is unsettling. Harry shrugged, surprisingly unbothered by this revelation. Maybe it makes sense. The prophecy says I'm his equal, right? Why wouldn't our wands be connected too? Remus and Sirius exchanged concerned looks at this mature but somewhat dispassionate response. Over the years, they'd noticed Harry developing an almost philosophical approach to his prophesied role, accepting it as fact without the fear or resentment they might have expected. Their shopping nearly complete, they headed toward Fortescue's ice cream parlor for a treat before returning home. That's when the screaming started. It came from near Gringotts, a woman's panicked voice rising above the general din of the alley. "Help! Someone help! He's falling!" Harry's head snapped up, eyes finding the source of the commotion instantly. A small child, no more than 5 or 6, had somehow climbed onto the decorative stonework that adorned the upper facade of Gringotts. Now he teetered precariously on a ledge nearly 40 feet above the hard cobblestones below. Several wizards had drawn their wands, but hesitated to cast spells directly at the child for fear of startling him into a fall. Others were conjuring cushioning charms on the ground, but the boy was positioned above a decorative spike of the bank's fence, directly in his fall path. "Someone get a broom," a wizard shouted. "The goblins have anti-summoning wards," another replied. Harry didn't stop to think. With movements honed by years of precise magical training, he drew his new wand. The magic flowed through it perfectly, powerful but controlled, directed exactly as he intended. "Wingardium Leviosa," he called, focusing on the child. What happened next caused gasps throughout the crowded street. Instead of the child simply floating gently, a visible shell of golden magical energy surrounded him, lifting him safely away from the ledge and slowly lowering him to the ground well clear of the dangerous fence. The spell shouldn't have been visible. Levitation charms didn't normally create glowing energy fields. But Harry's magic, channeled through his new wand for the first time in public, manifested in a way that made his power unmistakable to everyone watching. As the child reached the ground safely and ran to his sobbing mother, attention shifted to Harry, the thin boy with messy black hair and a lightning scar, wand still extended, magical aura faintly visible around him before he consciously suppressed it. Whispers spread through the crowd, "That's Harry Potter, did you see that magic? So powerful, the most dangerous wizard alive, he saved that boy." Remus placed a protective hand on Harry's shoulder. "Time to go," he murmured. But before they could move, the child's mother pushed through the crowd, her son clutched tightly to her chest. "You saved him," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Everyone else was just standing there, but you." She shook her head, seemingly at a loss for words. "I'm glad he's okay," Harry said simply. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't, the woman insisted. They were too afraid of making a mistake. "You weren't." As Remus finally managed to guide Harry away from the growing crowd, reporters from the Daily Prophet already pushing forward with cameras and quick quotes quills, Harry reflected on the woman's words. They were too afraid. He hadn't been. Perhaps that was the difference between being powerful and being dangerous, knowing when to act despite the risks. The Daily Prophet's headline the next morning surprised no one in the cottage. Boy Who performs extraordinary magic in Diagon Alley. Harry Potter, the most dangerous wizard alive, saves child with unprecedented display. The article beneath was surprisingly positive, focusing on Harry's quick thinking and precise control rather than the unusual manifestation of his magic. Eyewitness accounts described the golden shield that had surrounded the child, the careful way Harry had guided him to safety, and the modest response afterward. Perhaps, the article concluded, it's time to reconsider the dangerous label attached to young Mr. Potter. Yesterday's events suggest extraordinarily gifted might be more accurate, and his gift was used only to help, not harm. Well, Sirius remarked over breakfast, that's a change of tune from their usual fearmongering. Public sentiment shifts quickly, Remus observed. One heroic act witnessed by hundreds outweighs years of speculation and rumors. Harry, who had been braced for negative coverage, felt cautiously optimistic. Do you think this will help with, at Hogwarts? Kids not being terrified of me? It can't hurt, Remus said. Though I expect you'll still face plenty of curiosity and wariness. 7 years of daily profit stories about your dangerous potential won't be erased by one positive article. Speaking of Hogwarts, Sirius interjected, Augusta Fire called earlier. Apparently there's some sort of orientation session for Muggle-born and unusual case students next week. She thinks you should attend. Orientation session? Harry frowned. That's not standard. New initiative this year, Remus explained. Dumbledore's idea, actually. A day at Hogwarts for students who might need extra preparation, Muggle-borns unfamiliar with magical society, students with special circumstances, those with anxiety about the transition. And I qualify because. Your unique educational background, Sirius quoted with finger quotes. Plus, I think Dumbledore wants to introduce you to the castle in a smaller group setting before throwing you into the full welcome feast chaos. Harry considered this. A chance to familiarize himself with Hogwarts alongside others who were also different, in some way seemed appealing. Will Neville be there? Yes, Augusta's arranged it, Remus confirmed. She thinks it will help with his confidence. Then I'm in, Harry decided. Anything that included Neville would be more comfortable than going alone. The following week brought another trip to the Ministry, this time to the Department of Magical Education, where Harry and Remus met with Professor McGonagall to discuss the orientation session and finalize Harry's accommodations at Hogwarts. Your quarters will be here, McGonagall explained, pointing to a floor plan of the castle. Adjacent to Gryffindor Tower but separate, with a private entrance. Should you be sorted into another house, we'll arrange similar accommodations near that house's dormitory. So I'll still be connected to whichever house I'm sorted into? Harry asked. This was important to him, he didn't want complete isolation. Precisely. You'll take meals at your house table, attend classes with your housemates, and have full access to the common room. The only difference is sleeping arrangements and a private study area for practicing magic safely. And the restriction is just for the first term. If things go well, I could move into regular dormitories after Christmas. McGonagall's stern expression softened slightly. That is the agreement, Mr. Potter. Though I would caution against rushing the transition. Hogwarts can be emotionally stimulating for all first years. Given your particular magical sensitivity to emotional states, a private space might prove valuable regardless. Harry nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in this. His accidental magic incidents, though rare now, still correlated strongly with emotional extremes. Homesickness, exam stress, conflicts with peers, all could potentially trigger magical surges in a young wizard still growing into his power. Now, regarding the orientation session, McGonagall continued. It will take place this Saturday. 10 students are participating, including yourself and Mr. Longbottom. The schedule includes a tour of the castle, introductory sessions with key professors, and a practice sorting. Practice sorting? Harry questioned. Not with the actual sorting hat, McGonagall clarified. Just an exercise to help students understand the house qualities and consider where they might fit best. Many find it reduces anxiety about the actual sorting. Harry wasn't particularly anxious about sorting, Remus and Sirius had explained the process years ago, but he understood why it might help others. Will there be? I mean, do the other students know who I am? Harry asked hesitantly. About the most dangerous wizard alive stuff. McGonagall's lips thinned. The Muggle-born students likely do not. The wizarding-raised ones, unfortunately, yes, they will have heard the stories. However, Professor Dumbledore will speak with the group about respectful interaction and not judging based on sensationalist reporting. Great, Harry sighed. So they'll all be watching me for signs of imminent magical explosion. Perhaps, McGonagall said dryly, or perhaps they'll be more impressed by your recent heroics in Diagon Alley. That story has circulated widely. Saturday arrived with a mixture of excitement and trepidation for Harry. He'd met magical children before, Neville regularly, and occasionally others at ministry-approved gatherings, but never in a setting where he would be just another student, not the most dangerous wizard alive under careful supervision. Remus accompanied Harry to Hogsmeade, where they met Neville and Augusta before proceeding to the castle. Other families were arriving too, some clearly Muggle, gawking at the impressive sight of Hogwarts, others magical but looking somewhat uncomfortable. "Nervous?" Harry asked Neville as they approached the castle gates. "Terrified," Neville admitted. "But less than I would be without this orientation. Gran thinks it'll help." "It will," Harry assured him. "We'll get a head start on learning the layout. No getting lost on the first day for us." Professor McGonagall greeted the assembled group at the entrance hall, 10 students and their accompanying adults. Harry recognized the pointy-faced blonde boy from Madame Malkin's, who gave him a calculating look upon noticing his presence. Beside the blonde stood a tall man with long silver blonde hair whom Harry immediately identified as Lucius Malfoy from the hearing. So the boy was Draco Malfoy, heir to the family Harry had heard so much about from Sirius. Among the others, Harry noticed a bushy-haired girl practically vibrating with excitement as she peppered her overwhelmed-looking parents with information apparently gleaned from books. A dark-skinned boy stood confidently beside his elegant mother. 2 identical Indian girls held hands, looking both nervous and thrilled. "Welcome to Hogwarts," McGonagall began. "Today's orientation is designed to ease your transition into magical education. Parents and guardians, you're welcome to join the initial tour, after which Professor Flitwick will provide a separate information session while the students participate in introductory activities." As McGonagall led them through the castle, Harry found himself hanging back slightly, trying to avoid attention. It didn't work. "You're Harry Potter," said the bushy-haired girl, falling into step beside him. It wasn't a question but a statement of fact. "I've read all about you. You're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 20th century. Yes," Harry responded, somewhat taken aback by this rapid-fire identification. "Though those books aren't very accurate about me." The girl looked scandalized at the suggestion that books might contain inaccuracies. "Really? But they're published texts." "They're mostly guesswork," Harry explained. "None of the authors actually spoke to me or my guardians." "Oh." The girl looked momentarily deflated before rallying. "I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. My parents are dentists, that's like Muggle healers for teeth. It was ever such a surprise when I got my letter, but I've been reading everything I can about the magical world. It's all so fascinating." "Nice to meet you," Harry said, finding her enthusiasm oddly refreshing. She seemed interested in him as a source of information rather than a potential magical threat. "This is my friend Neville Longbottom." Neville, who had been quietly following along, gave a shy wave. "Hello. Are you from a magical family too?" Hermione asked eagerly. "Yes," Neville nodded. "Been around magic all my life." "That must be wonderful. I have so many questions about growing up with magic. Is it true wizard children get toy broomsticks? And do magical portraits really talk to you? I read about a portrait in the ministry that gives advice to the Minister of Magic, but that seems rather unreliable, doesn't it? I mean, how could a painting stay current on policy?" As Hermione continued her enthusiastic questioning, Harry noticed Draco Malfoy watching their interaction with undisguised disdain. When their eyes met, Malfoy deliberately turned away, whispering something to a heavy-set boy beside him that made them both snicker. The tour proceeded through major areas of the castle, the Great Hall with its enchanted ceiling, the library, where Hermione looked ready to abandon the tour entirely, the hospital wing, and several classrooms. Throughout, Harry found Hermione continuing to ask him questions whenever McGonagall paused her explanations. "Is it true you can do wandless magic? The Daily Prophet article about the boy you saved said you created some kind of golden shield. That's well beyond first-year magic, isn't it? Have you been practicing long? Will you be starting with advanced classes?" "Hermione," Harry finally interrupted gently, "I don't mind questions, but maybe not all at once. She blushed. Sorry. I get carried away. It's just, meeting someone who's in the history books is rather exciting. I'm just a regular person, Harry insisted. The books and papers exaggerate everything. Even the part about being the most powerful young wizard in centuries. She asked skeptically. Before Harry could answer, Draco Malfoy's drawling voice cut in. Potter's not just powerful, Granger. He's dangerous. Destroyed his relative's house when he was 4. Ministry keeps special tabs on him. My father says he shouldn't even be allowed at Hogwarts with normal students. Harry tensed, but managed to keep his magic in check despite the provocation. Years of control training hadn't been for nothing. That's not true, Neville spoke up with uncharacteristic firmness. Harry has perfect control. And he saved that boy in Diagon Alley when no one else could. Standing up for your friend, Longbottom. Malfoy sneered. How touching. Though I'm not surprised you defend him, barely magical yourself, from what my father says. Must be nice having a friend who makes you look good by comparison. Harry felt his temper flare, not at the insults directed at him but at the attack on Neville. A subtle vibration ran through the stone floor beneath them, not enough to notice unless someone was specifically watching for signs of magical discharge. Hermione, however, seemed oblivious to the magical undercurrent. That's a horrible thing to say, she told Malfoy indignantly. And completely illogical. Someone's magical ability isn't a reflection on their friends. That's like saying your nastiness makes your friends look kinder, though in your case, it might be true. Malfoy looked stunned at being dressed down by a Muggle-born girl he'd just met. Before he could recover, McGonagall's voice called them to attention as they reached their next destination. Well handled, Harry murmured to Hermione. Both the defense and not mentioning the floor vibrating. The floor was. Hermione glanced down, then back at Harry with widened eyes. Oh. Was that you? Accidental reaction, Harry admitted. Much smaller than it used to be. I've had a lot of practice. Fascinating, Hermione whispered. Is it true you have to have special private quarters because of magical surges? Harry blinked in surprise. How did you know that? I didn't, she admitted. Just a logical deduction. If your magic responds to emotions and dormitories are shared spaces with lots of potential for conflict. She shrugged. It makes sense they'd want to give you privacy until you adjust. Harry found himself reassessing Hermione Granger. Beneath the book knowledge and eager questioning lay a sharp analytical mind. And she'd immediately defended Neville against Malfoy without hesitation, despite having just met them. After the tour, the parents departed for their separate information session, and the students were led to an unused classroom where Dumbledore waited to greet them. Harry noted how the headmaster's eyes twinkled with particular warmth when they landed on him. Welcome, young scholars, Dumbledore began. Today represents the beginning of your Hogwarts journey, a journey of discovery, growth, and friendship. Each of you comes with different backgrounds, different strengths, and different concerns. That diversity is Hogwarts' greatest treasure. His gaze swept the room, lingering briefly on each student. Some of you come from Muggle families, entering a world of magic for the first time. Others come from ancient magical lineages with generations of expectations. And some of you have unique circumstances that make your Hogwarts experience different from the typical students. Here, several eyes flicked toward Harry, who maintained a neutral expression. What unites you, Dumbledore continued, is potential. The potential to learn, to grow, and to forge your own path regardless of where you began. Hogwarts does not judge based on blood status, prior education, or public perception. Here, you will be evaluated on your actions, your character, and your choices. The headmaster's subtle message about not prejudging classmates seemed to resonate with most students, though Malfoy maintained an expression of polite skepticism. Now, as Professor McGonagall mentioned, we have prepared a house affinity exercise to help you understand the sorting process. While the actual sorting hat makes the final decision, considering where you might belong can ease anxieties about the ceremony. The exercise involved a series of scenario-based questions, asking how students would respond to various situations. Harry found himself torn between answers that reflected different house qualities: courage, Gryffindor; loyalty, Hufflepuff; wisdom, Ravenclaw; and ambition, Slytherin. His parents had been Gryffindors, as had Sirius. Remus, though also a Gryffindor, had once commented that Harry showed traits of all four houses. When they finished the exercise and calculated their points, Harry's results showed a near-even split between Gryffindor and Slytherin, with Ravenclaw close behind. Neville, to his obvious surprise, scored highest for Gryffindor. Hermione's results favored Ravenclaw but with strong Gryffindor tendencies. Malfoy, surprising absolutely no one, scored overwhelmingly for Slytherin. Remember, Dumbledore cautioned as they discussed their results, this exercise merely reflects your self-perception. The Sorting Hat sees deeper, considering not just who you are but who you might become. And ultimately, your own preferences matter, the hat takes them into account. After lunch in the Great Hall, a novel experience with just their small group present, the students were introduced to several professors who would teach their first-year classes. Professor Flitwick, upon meeting Harry, beamed with genuine pleasure. "Mr. Potter. Delightful to see you again. I've been following your progress reports with great interest. Most impressive control development for your age." "Thank you, Professor," Harry replied, grateful for the diminutive charms master's warmth. "I've been practicing those precision exercises you recommended." "Excellent, excellent. I look forward to seeing how you adapt to wand-focused channeling after so much wandless work." Flitwick turned to include Neville and Hermione, who stood nearby. "Charms is a wonderful subject for developing fine control. Even the simplest charm requires precise intention and proper magical direction." "I've been practicing with my wand," Hermione volunteered eagerly. "Just the movements, of course, no actual spells yet." "Is that allowed?" "Absolutely, Miss Granger, sir." "Hermione Granger." "Miss Granger." Wand movements are an excellent starting point. The physical component helps focus the magical intent, particularly for beginners. Flitwick turned to Neville, who looked nervous about being addressed. "And you, young man?" "Neville Longbottom, sir. I'm not very good with my wand yet. It was my father's, and it doesn't seem to cooperate." Flitwick's expression turned thoughtful. "Inherited wands can be tricky, Mr. Longbottom. While they sometimes work adequately for family members, they rarely perform optimally without choosing the wizard themselves. Have you considered acquiring your own wand?" "Gran thinks I should use my dad's," Neville said quietly. "To honor him." Harry, who had heard this explanation many times, finally spoke up. "Professor, could you maybe explain to Neville's grandmother why his own wand would help him succeed better? She respects academic authority." Flitwick glanced between the boys, understanding dawning in his eyes. "I would be happy to write to Madame Longbottom explaining the magical theory behind wand selection. Perhaps approaching it from an academic perspective would be persuasive." Neville looked both terrified and hopeful at this suggestion. "You do that, sir?" "Of course. My job is to help students succeed, Mr. Longbottom. And the right wand is fundamental to magical education." As they moved on to meet other professors, Hermione whispered to Harry, "That was really kind, what you did for Neville about the wand." Harry shrugged. "Neville's brilliant with plants and has strong magic. He just needs the right tools to show it." "You're nothing like the papers describe," Hermione observed. "They make you sound intimidating and, well, dangerous." "Turns out you shouldn't believe everything you read," Harry replied with a small smile. "Even in books." Hermione looked momentarily scandalized before laughing. "I suppose I deserved that." The orientation concluded with a final gathering where students could ask remaining questions before departing. As they prepared to leave, Malfoy approached Harry, his expression unreadable. "Potter, he said, deliberately keeping his voice low. My father says you're either going to be a powerful ally or a dangerous enemy. He thinks I should cultivate a connection either way. Harry raised an eyebrow at this unexpectedly blunt approach. And what do you think, Malfoy? I think the most dangerous wizard alive is either a fraud or a valuable friend to have. Malfoy extended his hand. So which is it? Harry considered the offered hand for a moment. Neither, he finally replied without taking it. I'm just Harry. Not a fraud, not a danger, and not interested in being valued for my supposed power. Malfoy's face flushed with embarrassment at the rejected handshake. You'll regret that, Potter. Some wizarding families are better than others. You don't want to make enemies of the wrong sort. Probably not, Harry agreed mildly. But I think I can figure out the wrong sort for myself, thanks. As Malfoy stalked away, Hermione and Neville rejoined Harry. What was that about? Hermione asked. Politics, Harry said simply. Apparently I'm supposed to pick sides before even starting school. My gran says the Malfoys only backed down from supporting you-know-who after he vanished, Neville murmured. They claimed they were under the Imperious Curse. The mind control spell? Hermione asked, looking alarmed. That's in one of the books I read about the Wizarding War. It was used as a defense by many accused Death Eaters. Convenient excuse, Harry noted. And hard to disprove. As they left the castle, Hermione hesitated before asking, would you two mind if I sat with you on the train to Hogwarts? I won't know anyone else, and you've both been so nice. Of course, Harry agreed immediately. Right, Neville? Neville nodded enthusiastically. Definitely. Brilliant. Hermione beamed. It'll be so much easier having friends from the start. I was worried about that, you know. I'm not always good at, well, people sometimes find me a bit much. You're fine, Harry assured her, finding her honesty refreshing. Just maybe save some questions for after I've had breakfast. My brain works better when fed. Hermione laughed. Deal. No interrogations before morning tea. With goodbyes exchanged and promises to meet on the Hogwarts Express, Harry rejoined Remus for the journey home, his mind buzzing with impressions from the day. How was it? Remus asked as they walked to the apparition point in Hogsmeade. Better than I expected, Harry admitted. Made a new friend, I think. Hermione Granger, Muggle-born, incredibly smart. Asks a million questions but doesn't seem frightened of me at all. That's wonderful, Remus said, looking genuinely pleased. And the others? Mixed. Malfoy's exactly what Sirius described. Some seemed wary, others just curious. But no one actually backed away in fear, so I'm counting it as a win. Remus chuckled. Progress indeed. And the castle? Feeling more comfortable about September? Harry nodded, realizing that the orientation had accomplished exactly what it intended, transforming Hogwarts from an abstract destination to a real place where he could envision himself learning and living. I think I'm ready, he said. Or as ready as I'll ever be. September 1st arrived with typical Scottish drizzle, the clouds hanging low over the mountains surrounding the cottage. Harry woke early, his trunk already packed and waiting by the door. Hedwig, a snowy owl that had been Sirius's birthday gift, every Hogwarts student needs a proper familiar, dozed in her cage, unperturbed by the pre-departure activity below. Nervous? Sirius asked, finding Harry staring out the window instead of eating the breakfast Remus had prepared. Not nervous exactly, Harry replied. Just, processing, I guess. After 7 years of special training and ministry monitoring, I'm finally doing something normal wizarding kids do. Taking the train to Hogwarts like everyone else. Well, not exactly like everyone else, Sirius pointed out, helping himself to Harry's untouched toast. You've got private quarters, a specialized wand, and quarterly evaluations. But close enough. Harry rolled his eyes at his godfather's teasing. You know what I mean. I do, Sirius agreed, his tone turning serious. And it's a big step. But you're ready, Harry. More ready than most first years, honestly. Magically, maybe, Harry conceded. Socially. That's another story. Remus joined them, carrying a final mug of tea for Harry. Your social skills are fine. You connected well with Hermione at the orientation, and you've always had Neville. 2 friends out of hundreds of students, Harry sighed. And how many will just see the most dangerous wizard alive when they look at me? Some, Remus acknowledged honestly. At first. But actions speak louder than newspaper articles, Harry. Show them who you really are, and the right people will notice. And the wrong people? Harry asked. Will be wrong, Sirius shrugged. Can't please everyone, kiddo. Your dad used to say, worrying about everyone liking you is the fastest way to become no one at all, Harry finished, having heard this particular James Potter wisdom many times. The journey to King's Cross Station was uneventful, though Harry drew some curious looks for Hedwig's cage as they navigated the Muggle portions of the journey. Sirius, still operating under a glamour charm in public despite years without recapture, maintained a watchful presence while Remus handled the practical aspects of getting them to platform 9 3/4. The platform itself was chaos, parents hugging children goodbye, students reuniting with friends, trolleys loaded with trunks and animal cages creating an obstacle course. Harry felt the familiar press of magical energy from so many wizards in one place, but his control held steady. Years of practice had made this manageable, if not entirely comfortable. They spotted Augusta and Neville near the middle of the platform, the elderly witch's vulture-topped hat making her impossible to miss in any crowd. There you are, Augusta greeted them with a curt nod. Neville's been fidgeting like a Kneazle in a rocking chair shop all morning. Neville, looking simultaneously nervous and excited, gave Harry a small wave. Hi. Got a compartment already. Near the back. Brilliant, Harry said, relieved to avoid searching through the crowded train. Is there room for one more? I told Hermione we'd sit together. The Muggle-born girl from orientation. Of course, Neville nodded. Plenty of space. As Augusta engaged Remus in conversation about the term schedule, Sirius pulled Harry slightly aside. Got something for you, he said quietly, pressing a small package into Harry's hand. Open it once you're alone at Hogwarts. Harry raised an eyebrow. Is this going to get me in trouble? Probably, Sirius grinned unrepentantly. But it's a Potter family heirloom, so technically it's rightfully yours. Your dad would want you to have it for proper Hogwarts mischief. Sirius, Remus warned, overhearing the last part. What are you giving him? Just a little something to help him explore the castle, Sirius said innocently. Nothing dangerous. Remus looked suspicious but was distracted by the train whistle announcing 5 minutes until departure. The platform became even more frantic as last-minute goodbyes were exchanged. Remember, Remus told Harry quietly as they prepared to part, Professor Flitwick is your faculty mentor. If you have any issues with your magic, any concerns at all, go to him immediately. I know, Harry assured him. We've been over this a dozen times. And write at least weekly, Remus continued. More often if anything significant happens. Like making the Quidditch team as a first year? Sirius suggested hopefully. Like any magical incidents, changes in your control, or unusual dreams, Remus corrected firmly. Though normal updates about classes and friends are welcome too. The final whistle blew. Harry hugged both his guardians quickly, promising to write soon, then hurried onto the train with Neville. They maneuvered through crowded corridors until they reached the compartment Neville had secured, finding Hermione already inside with a book open on her lap. There you are, she exclaimed, looking up. I was worried you might not find me. The train's absolutely packed. Neville saved us seats, Harry explained, stowing his trunk in Hedwig's cage. Good thinking, by the way, he added to Neville. Getting here early. Gran insisted, Neville admitted. Said the early wizard catches the billywig. As the train pulled away from the station, Harry caught a final glimpse of Remus and Sirius on the platform, his unconventional family, who had protected and prepared him for this moment through years of ministry scrutiny and specialized training. Now he was on his own, or as someone constantly monitored by magical authorities could be. The journey passed pleasantly with Hermione asking somewhat fewer questions than at orientation, though still plenty, Neville sharing stories about his greenhouse projects over the summer, and Harry carefully deflecting inquiries about his special training, without seeming evasive. He'd learned long ago that honesty about his abilities, minus certain sensitive details, created less suspicion than attempting to hide them completely. So you really can do wandless magic? Asked a new arrival, a tall, lanky red-headed boy who had joined their compartment about an hour into the journey. He'd introduced himself as Ron Weasley and had been quietly listening to their conversation while sharing his sandwiches. Harry acknowledged. Nothing complicated. Basic levitation, summoning small objects, that sort of thing. This was a deliberate understatement. Harry could wandlessly perform magic equivalent to a third or fourth year student with a wand, but he'd found that downplaying his abilities made others more comfortable. Wicked, Ron said, looking impressed rather than frightened. My brothers, Fred and George, they're twins, they've been trying to learn wandless magic for years. Can't manage more than making a feather wobble. It's supposed to be very advanced, Hermione chimed in. Most adult wizards never master it beyond simple spells. That's why wands are so important for focusing magical energy. My wand's giving me trouble already, Ron admitted, pulling out a battered-looking wand with something white protruding from the end. It's Charlie's old one, my brother's. Unicorn hair's starting to poke out. Dad tried to fix it, but... Hand-me-down wands are tricky, Harry said, echoing Flitwick's words to Neville. They've already bonded with someone else. Not much choice when you're the sixth son, Ron shrugged, though his ears reddened slightly. New wands are expensive. The conversation shifted to houses, with Ron declaring his entire family had been in Gryffindor. Imagine if they put me somewhere else. I think my mum would die of shock, Hermione analyzing the pros and cons of each house with methodical precision, and Neville admitting his grandmother expected Gryffindor but he'd probably end up in Hufflepuff. Houses don't define you completely, Harry pointed out. My guardian Remus says it's more about what qualities you value than what you actually possess. Plenty of smart people in houses besides Ravenclaw, brave people outside Gryffindor, and so on. Where do you think you'll go? Ron asked Harry. Not sure, Harry admitted honestly. My parents were Gryffindors, but the orientation exercise showed I could fit several places. You'd make a good Ravenclaw with all that specialized training, Hermione suggested. Though Gryffindor would suit your saving people tendency. My what? Harry asked, bemused. Saving people tendency, Hermione repeated matter-of-factly. You know, rescuing children from dangerous ledges, defending Neville against Malfoy, suggesting solutions for his wand problem. You seem to instinctively help others in trouble. Harry hadn't considered this pattern before. I just do what seems right. Classic Gryffindor, Ron declared with a sage nod. Their compartment door slid open again, revealing Draco Malfoy flanked by two large boys who resembled junior bodyguards. Heard Harry Potter was in this compartment, Malfoy drawled. Should have known he'd end up with blood traitors, squibs, and mudbloods. The atmosphere instantly tensed. Neville paled at the insult, while Hermione looked confused. Ron, however, jumped to his feet, face flushing with anger. Say that again, he challenged. Ron, Harry interrupted, remaining deliberately calm. 7 years of controlling his magic during provocation had taught him to manage his emotions carefully. Malfoy's just trying to get a reaction. Smart, Potter, Malfoy smirked. Controlling that famous temper. Wouldn't want another incident, would we? Harry felt a flicker of annoyance but suppressed it, along with the magical response that might have accompanied it. "Did you need something specific, Malfoy? Or just dropping by to demonstrate your charming personality?" "Just checking if you've reconsidered my offer," Malfoy replied. "Last chance to align yourself with the right sort before sorting makes it official." "Still able to decide for myself, thanks," Harry said evenly. "Though if the right sort uses words like mudblood, I'm even more certain of my decision." Malfoy's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret that, Potter. Not everyone's impressed by your celebrity status or your supposed power." "Good," Harry replied sincerely. "I'd rather people judge me for who I am than what they've read about me. Now, if you don't mind, we were having a conversation." For a moment, it seemed Malfoy might escalate the confrontation, but he apparently thought better of challenging someone with Harry's reputation directly. With a final contemptuous look, he departed, his companions following. "What's a mudblood?" Hermione asked once they'd gone, her voice small. "It's a disgusting slur for Muggleborns," Ron explained, still scowling after Malfoy. "Only pureblood supremacist types use it." "Oh." Hermione's face fell. "So he was insulting me for my parents being non-magical. Him and his whole family are rubbish," Ron declared hotly. "Dad says the Malfoys were right in you-know-whose inner circle but weaseled out of punishment after the war." Harry, noticing Hermione's hurt expression, added gently, "Blood status is meaningless, Hermione. My mum was Muggleborn and became one of the most talented witches of her generation. Magical ability has nothing to do with ancestry. Besides," Neville added with unusual confidence, "you already know more magic theory than most pureblood kids our age. Intelligence and hard work matter more than who your grandparents were." Hermione brightened at this support. "Thanks. I just didn't expect to face prejudice so quickly." "Unfortunately, those attitudes exist in parts of wizarding society," Harry acknowledged. "But they're not the majority view at Hogwarts, from what I've heard. Especially not with Dumbledore as headmaster." As the train continued northward, the conversation gradually returned to lighter topics. When the trolley lady came by with snacks, Harry bought a selection to share, introducing Hermione to wizarding sweets while Ron explained the finer points of chocolate frog card collecting. The afternoon wore on with changing landscapes outside their window. Eventually, the announcement came to change into their school robes as they approached Hogwarts. Harry felt a strange mixture of emotions as he donned the standard black robes: excitement, anxiety, and a profound sense that he was crossing a threshold into a new chapter of his life. As the train slowed and finally stopped at Hogsmeade Station, students poured onto the platform. A booming voice called, "First years. First years over here." Harry grinned, recognizing Hagrid immediately. "Hi, Hagrid," he called, waving. "All right, Harry," the giant man beamed, waving back. "Made it to Hogwarts proper at last, eh? Come on, follow me, first years this way." The traditional boat journey across the lake offered a spectacular view of Hogwarts Castle illuminated against the night sky. Though Harry had seen it before, both during his brief stay at age 4 and at the orientation, the sight still took his breath away. Beside him in the boat, Hermione gasped in wonder, while Neville and Ron stared open-mouthed at their new school. After reaching the castle and climbing the stone steps to the entrance hall, they were greeted by Professor McGonagall, who explained the sorting ceremony and house system before leading them into the Great Hall. Harry had experienced this room during orientation, but never filled with hundreds of students seated at 4 long tables, the enchanted ceiling above reflecting a clear night sky dotted with stars. As they lined up before the high table where the professor sat, Harry noticed many students craning their necks to get a look at him. Whispers followed him just as they had in Diagon Alley. "That's him, Harry Potter, the most dangerous wizard alive. Did you see the Prophet article about him saving that kid? I heard he can do wandless magic already." Harry kept his gaze forward, maintaining the calm center he'd cultivated through years of meditation and control exercises. Beside him, Neville looked terrified, while Hermione was whispering rapid-fire facts about the enchanted ceiling to anyone who would listen. The sorting hat was brought out, singing its song about the 4 houses before McGonagall began calling students forward alphabetically. Harry watched as Abbott, Hannah, became a Hufflepuff, followed by others sorted into various houses. Hermione, when called, spent nearly a full minute under the hat before it declared Gryffindor. She looked both surprised and delighted as she hurried to the cheering table. Neville's sorting took even longer, with the boy visibly arguing with the hat before it finally shouted Gryffindor. Neville was so relieved he ran off still wearing the hat and had to return it amidst good-natured laughter. Malfoy, as expected, was immediately sorted into Slytherin. More names followed until finally, Potter, Harry. The hall fell silent as Harry stepped forward. As he sat on the stool, the last thing he saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was hundreds of faces staring at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to apprehension. Said a small voice in his ear. Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and power, more raw power than I've seen in centuries. And such control for one so young. You've worked hard to master your gifts. Thank you, Harry thought, wondering if the hat could hear him. Indeed I can, the hat replied. Now, where to put you? You could do well in any house, you know. Ravenclaw would nurture that quick mind. Hufflepuff would value your loyalty and work ethic. Slytherin could help you achieve greatness with that power, there's ambition there, and a desire to prove yourself as more than a label. Harry considered this. He'd been wondering about his sorting for years, discussing it with both Sirius, who favored Gryffindor, and Remus, who maintained Harry would excel anywhere. Ah, but there's that quality your friend identified, the instinct to help others, to stand between danger and the innocent. And look at these friendships you've already formed. The loyalty of a Hufflepuff, the mind of a Ravenclaw, the ambition of a Slytherin, but at your core. Gryffindor, the hat shouted to the hall. The Gryffindor table erupted in the loudest cheers yet. Harry removed the hat and walked toward his new house, where Hermione was beaming and Neville had saved him a seat. He noticed the Weasley twins doing a little dance and chanting, "We got Potter. We got Potter." As he sat down, surrounded by welcoming Gryffindors, Harry felt a weight lift from his shoulders. 7 years of being classified, evaluated, and monitored as the most dangerous wizard alive had set him apart. But here, now, he was simply a first-year Gryffindor, albeit one with an unusual reputation and private quarters. The sorting continued with Ron predictably joining them in Gryffindor, looking relieved as he slid into a seat across from Harry. When the ceremony concluded, Dumbledore rose to give his start-of-term announcements, his eyes twinkling as they briefly met Harry's across the hall. Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our excellent feast, I have a few start-of-term notices. First years should note that the Forbidden Forest is strictly off-limits to all students. Mr. Filch has asked me to remind you that magic is not permitted in the corridors between classes. Dumbledore continued with various announcements before concluding with, and finally, the third-floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to die a very painful death. A few students laughed nervously, but Harry frowned, suspecting Dumbledore wouldn't make such a statement without reason. After the feast, as Percy Weasley gathered the Gryffindor first-years to lead them to the tower, Professor McGonagall approached Harry. "Mr. Potter, if you'll come with me, I'll show you to your quarters. They're adjacent to Gryffindor Tower but have a separate entrance." Several nearby students looked curious at this special treatment. Ron, who had been walking beside Harry, asked, "You're not staying in the dormitory with us?" "Special arrangement," Harry explained briefly, not wanting to draw more attention. "Just for the first term. I'll still be in Gryffindor." McGonagall led Harry through a corridor branching off from the main path to Gryffindor Tower, stopping before a painting of a wizard practicing wand movements beside a window overlooking mountains. "This is Galen the Measured," McGonagall explained. "He will guard your quarters. The password is Equilibrium. You may change it if you wish, though please inform me if you do." "Greetings, young wizard," the portrait said, studying Harry with interest. "Professor McGonagall has explained your situation. Rest assured, your privacy will be maintained." "Thank you, sir," Harry responded politely. "Equilibrium," McGonagall stated, and the portrait swung open to reveal a comfortable suite. It included a bedroom similar to what Harry glimpsed of the regular dormitories, a small private bathroom, and most impressively, a study area with reinforced walls. "The study space has been specially warded for magical practice," McGonagall explained. "Should you experience any surge of accidental magic, the room will contain it without damage. Professor Flitwick also arranged monitoring charms that will alert him if magical output exceeds certain thresholds, allowing him to assist if needed." Harry nodded, understanding the precautions while still feeling the sting of being treated differently. "Your trunk has been brought up," McGonagall continued, indicating where it sat at the foot of his bed. "You'll find a door in your bedroom that connects directly to the first-year boys' dormitory. You may use it to socialize with your housemates, though it remains locked from their side for privacy." "Thank you, Professor," Harry said. "This is more than I expected." McGonagall's stern expression softened slightly. "We want you to have as normal an experience as possible, Mr. Potter, while respecting your unique needs. Professor Dumbledore believes, as do I, that your control has progressed remarkably. These accommodations are precautionary, not punitive." After McGonagall departed, Harry explored his quarters, finding them comfortable if somewhat isolating. The connecting door to the dormitory was a thoughtful feature, allowing him to join the other boys while still having private space for magical practice or when he needed solitude. Remembering Sirius's parting gift, Harry retrieved the small package from his trunk and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a worn piece of blank parchment and a note in Sirius's handwriting: "To activate, tap with your wand and say, 'I solemnly swear that I am up to no good.' To deactivate, mischief managed. Your father, Remus, Peter, and I created this during our Hogwarts years. It shows every corner of the castle and everyone in it. Use it wisely, and by wisely, I mean for proper mischief worthy of a marauder's son. Love, Padfoot." Curious, Harry tapped the parchment with his wand and recited, "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." Immediately, ink lines spread across the parchment like a spiderweb, connecting and forming a detailed map of Hogwarts Castle. At the top, elaborate script proclaimed, "Messrs. Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, purveyors of aids to magical mischief makers, are proud to present the Marauder's map." Harry gasped as he realized what he was seeing: not just a map, but a living document showing the current location of every person in the castle, labeled with tiny moving dots. He could see Dumbledore pacing in his office, Filch patrolling a third-floor corridor, and the Gryffindor dormitories filling with students preparing for bed. "Brilliant," he whispered, understanding why Sirius had waited until now to give him this treasure. With the map, Harry could navigate Hogwarts with confidence, avoid unwanted encounters, and explore freely despite the restrictions placed on him. A knock on the connecting door interrupted his examination. Quickly saying, "Mischief managed," Harry watched the map fade back to blank parchment before tucking it away and opening the door. Ron, Neville, and 3 other boys, who introduced themselves as Dean Thomas, Seamus Finnegan, and Oliver Rivers, stood in the doorway, curiosity evident on their faces. "So this is where they're keeping you," Ron said, peering around Harry at the private suite. "Wicked. You've got your own study." "It's not as great as it looks," Harry said, stepping back to let them in. "Just extra precautions because of my history with accidental magic." "The house exploding thing?" Seamus asked bluntly. "My mum told me about that. Said you're the most powerful kid wizard in centuries." Harry winced. "It's exaggerated. I had an incident when I was 4, and the ministry's been overcautious ever since." "But you can do wandless magic, right?" Dean asked eagerly. "We saw the Prophet article about you saving that kid in Diagon Alley." "Some basics," Harry admitted. "Nothing special." "Show us something," Oliver requested, eyes wide with interest rather than fear. Harry hesitated, then decided a small demonstration might actually help normalize his abilities rather than mystify them. He held out his hand and concentrated, causing his wand to fly from the desk where he'd placed it into his palm, a simple wandless summoning charm he'd mastered years ago. The boys reacted with impressed exclamations rather than alarm, immediately peppering him with questions about how he'd learned such a skill and whether he could teach them. Harry found himself relaxing as the conversation shifted to normal first-year topics, classes they were looking forward to, Quidditch teams they supported, and speculation about their professors. "So you'll join us in the dormitory after Christmas if everything goes well?" Neville asked. "That's the plan," Harry confirmed. "This is just temporary while they make sure I'm adjusted to the castle environment." "Better not sleepwalk," Ron grinned. "Imagine waking up and finding out you'd accidentally turned the common room into a swamp or something." The others laughed, and Harry found himself joining in, grateful for the easy acceptance. These boys knew his reputation, the most dangerous wizard alive, had been plastered across the prophet for years, yet they were treating him like a normal, if unusually talented, classmate. Eventually, the other boys returned to their dormitory, promising to wait for Harry in the morning so they could go to breakfast together. Alone again, Harry prepared for bed, reflecting on the day's events as he changed into pajamas. His Hogwarts journey had officially begun, not as an isolated, closely monitored threat, but as a Gryffindor first year with friends, classes, and the normal excitement of school ahead. Yes, he had private quarters instead of a shared dormitory. Yes, the ministry would continue its quarterly evaluations. But for the first time since the Dursley incident, Harry felt like his magic might be an asset rather than a burden. As he drifted towards sleep, Harry contemplated the Sorting Hat's words. It had seen his power but focused more on his character, his courage, intelligence, loyalty, and ambition. Not once had it called him dangerous. Instead, it had recognized his hard work in gaining control and the quality Hermione had identified, his instinct to protect others. Perhaps that was the answer to the label that had followed him for 7 years. Not denying his unusual power or pretending to be like everyone else, but demonstrating through his actions that power itself was neutral. What mattered was how you used it and who you chose to be. With that comforting thought, Harry Potter, Gryffindor first year, not just the most dangerous wizard alive, fell asleep in his new home at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The first week of classes provided a crash course in Hogwarts life for Harry. While he'd received years of specialized magical tutoring, formal classroom instruction proved to be a different experience entirely, particularly with his magical control now channeled primarily through his wand rather than wandless techniques. In charms, Professor Flitwick made a point of neither singling Harry out nor ignoring his unique background, instead treating him as a student with prior experience but much still to learn. When Harry successfully performed the levitation charm on his first attempt, Flitwick praised his technique while suggesting refinements to his wand movement, treating the achievement as the result of practice rather than innate ability. Transfiguration with Professor McGonagall proved more challenging, not because Harry couldn't perform the magic, but because the precision required to channel his power through a wand for delicate transformations was different from his wandless approach. When his match-to-needle transfiguration resulted in a perfectly formed silver needle surrounded by a brief flash of visible magic, McGonagall assigned him additional control exercises. "Your results are excellent, Mr. Potter," she noted after class, "but magical efficiency needs work. You're using enough power for 10 transfigurations to accomplish one." "I'm still adjusting to wand channeling," Harry explained. "It's like trying to pour a gallon of water through a straw." An apt analogy. "We'll work on it during your sessions with Professor Flitwick." Potions presented an unexpected challenge. Professor Snape, who had occasionally evaluated Harry's progress over the years, maintained a cool, professional demeanor during class. However, his opening remarks made his expectations clear. "Potter," he said when reaching Harry's name during roll call, "our new celebrity. I expect precise control and perfect attention in this classroom. Your special status earns you no special treatment here." "Yes, sir," Harry responded evenly, having been briefed by both Remus and Sirius about Snape's complicated history with his parents. To Harry's relief, Snape seemed more interested in testing his knowledge than his reputation, peppering him with questions about potion ingredients and procedures. Thanks to years of specialized education, Harry answered most correctly, which seemed to simultaneously satisfy and irritate the potion's master. "At least your guardians ensured you weren't completely unprepared," Snape acknowledged grudgingly before moving on. Outside of classes, Harry navigated the complex social dynamics of being both the boy who lived and the most dangerous wizard alive. Some students approached him with open curiosity, others with wary respect, and a few, particularly certain Slytherins, with undisguised skepticism about his abilities. "If you're so powerful, why do you need special quarters?" Pansy Parkinson asked loudly during a mixed-house herbology lesson. "Afraid you'll curse your roommates in your sleep?" "The quarters are temporary," Harry replied calmly, focusing on the bouncing bulb he was repotting. "Just while I adjust to the castle's magical environment. Or while the professors make sure you're not going to blow up the tower," Draco Malfoy added with a smirk. "My father says the Ministry wanted you in magical restraints, but Dumbledore overruled them." "Your father seems unusually interested in my living arrangements," Harry observed mildly. "Perhaps he should get a hobby." Several Gryffindors snickered, and even Professor Sprout's lips twitched before she called the class back to attention. Harry's friendship with Hermione deepened through shared academic interests and mutual understanding of being different. While Harry's difference came from his unusual magical power, Hermione's stemmed from her encyclopedic knowledge and intense academic drive, which initially alienated some classmates. "They call me a know-it-all," she confided during a study session in the library. "I'm just trying to contribute, but apparently I come across as showing off." "I understand feeling different," Harry assured her. "Maybe try holding back a bit in class. Not every question needs answering, and giving others a chance might help them warm up to you." Hermione considered this advice thoughtfully. "I suppose I could raise my hand less often. It's just, I get excited when I know something." "Nothing wrong with that," Harry smiled. "Just remember, friendship isn't about proving how smart you are, it's about connecting with people." Ron, whose laid-back attitude balanced Hermione's intensity, gradually became the third member of their core group, though he and Hermione frequently bickered over study habits and class preparation. Neville, who had known Harry longest, completed their circle, growing noticeably more confident simply by association with friends who valued him. The first milestone in Harry's Hogwarts journey came at the end of September with his initial progress review. Professor Flitwick, as his faculty mentor, had been conducting weekly sessions to assess his magical control and adjustment to wand magic. Now, a more formal evaluation would determine whether any modifications to his accommodations were needed. "Your control has been exemplary, Mr. Potter," Flitwick reported during their meeting, which included Professors McGonagall and Dumbledore. "The monitoring charms in your study space have recorded consistent, controlled magical output during practice. No significant accidental discharges at all. The visible manifestation of your magic during spellcasting has decreased as well," McGonagall added. "Still present, but less pronounced than in your first lessons. I've been practicing the focusing exercises," Harry explained. "Visualizing a narrower channel for the magic to flow through the wand." Dumbledore, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. "How are you finding the balance between your wandless abilities and traditional wand usage, Harry? Any difficulties reconciling the two approaches?" Harry considered the question carefully. "It's like learning two dialects of the same language. Wandless magic feels more intuitive but requires more energy. Wand magic is more efficient but sometimes feels constrained." An insightful observation, Dumbledore nodded approvingly. "Many adult wizards who attempt wandless magic after years of wand dependency experience similar distinctions. You have the rare advantage of developing both skills simultaneously." "Will I need to choose one over the other eventually?" Harry asked, voicing a concern that had been growing since starting formal classes. "Absolutely not," Flitwick assured him. "In fact, your wandless foundation may ultimately make you a more versatile and adaptable wizard." The key is achieving harmony between the two approaches rather than compartmentalizing them. The meeting concluded with unanimous agreement that Harry's accommodation arrangements should continue unchanged for the time being, with another review before the Christmas holidays to determine if dormitory integration would be appropriate for the second term. As October arrived, bringing crisp autumn air and falling leaves to the Hogwarts grounds, Harry settled into a rhythm that balanced classes, friendships, private magical practice, and exploration of the castle using the marauder's map. His reputation gradually shifted among his peers from potentially dangerous to unusually gifted, a subtle but meaningful distinction that made daily interactions less strained. The true test of this shifting perception came unexpectedly during a Thursday flying lesson with the Slytherins. When Neville lost control of his broomstick, falling and breaking his wrist, Madame Hooch took him to the hospital wing, leaving the class with strict instructions not to fly in her absence. Naturally, Malfoy ignored this directive, snatching up Neville's dropped Remembrall and taking to the air with it. "Give it here, Malfoy," Harry called firmly, mounting his own broom despite Hermione's protests about breaking rules. "Come and get it, Potter," Malfoy taunted, hovering 20 feet up. "Or are you afraid your famous power might make your broom explode?" Harry kicked off smoothly, discovering to his delight that flying came naturally to him. He accelerated toward Malfoy, who looked surprised at Harry's unexpected skill and confidence in the air. "No Crab and Goyle up here to save you," Harry observed, maneuvering his broom with instinctive ease. "Hand over the Remembrall. Catch it if you can, then," Malfoy shouted, throwing the glass ball hard toward the castle wall. Harry reacted instantly, diving after the Remembrall in a steep, controlled plunge. The wind whistled past his ears as he stretched out his hand, closing his fingers around the ball mere feet from the ground before pulling up into a perfect landing. The Gryffindors erupted in cheers, cut short by Professor McGonagall's arrival. "Harry Potter," she called, striding toward him with an expression of shock. Never, in all my time at Hogwarts, Harry braced himself for punishment, but what followed surprised everyone. Instead of detention, Harry found himself introduced to Oliver Wood, the Gryffindor Quidditch captain, and offered the position of seeker on the house team, an unprecedented opportunity for a first year. "You're not in trouble?" Ron asked incredulously when Harry returned and explained what had happened. "You're on the Quidditch team. McGonagall says my control in the air was impressive," Harry explained, still somewhat dazed by the turn of events. "Said I flew like my father. But first years never make the house teams," Seamus exclaimed. "You must be the youngest player in a century," Harry confirmed. According to Wood. The news spread through Hogwarts like wildfire. By dinner, everyone knew Harry Potter had become Gryffindor's new seeker. The reaction revealed how much perceptions had shifted in just 1 month. Instead of concerns about his magical control during the emotional intensity of matches, most students simply expressed excitement or envy about his opportunity. "First years aren't even allowed their own brooms," a Ravenclaw girl commented during dinner. "Will they make an exception for you?" "McGonagall's writing to my guardians about it," Harry replied. "She seems to think they'll approve a racing broom." Later that evening, as Harry practiced in his private study space, focusing on channeling precise amounts of magic through his wand for a color-changing charm, he reflected on the day's events. Flying had felt so natural, so freeing, perhaps because it required physical skill and instinct rather than the careful magical modulation he'd practiced for years. On the Quidditch pitch, no one had looked at him as the most dangerous wizard alive. He'd simply been a student with a natural talent for flying, judged on his actions in the moment rather than his reputation or potential. As the charm finally produced the exact shade of blue he'd been attempting, Harry smiled. Perhaps this was what normal felt like, being recognized for achievement rather than feared for ability. Being part of something larger than himself. Being just Harry. A tap at his window interrupted his practice. Looking up, he saw an unfamiliar owl bearing a letter. Opening the window, Harry accepted the delivery and gave the owl a treat from the supply he kept for Hedwig before unfolding the parchment. The message was brief but filled him with warmth. "Dear Harry, congratulations on making the Quidditch team. Your father would be bursting with pride, he was a brilliant chaser in his day. Mooney's gone all responsible, muttering about safety precautions, but I've already ordered you a Nimbus 2000, finest racing broom available. Should arrive within the week. McGonagall's reports about your progress have been glowing. Seems you're adjusting better than anyone expected. Keep it up, and you'll be in the regular dormitory by Christmas. Missing your troublemaking presence, Padfoot PS been using the special parchment I gave you? Found any interesting shortcuts yet? Harry grinned, thinking of the Marauder's map tucked safely in his trunk. He'd already discovered 3 secret passages and used one to visit Hogsmeade briefly the previous weekend, an excursion he hadn't mentioned in his letters home, suspecting Remus would disapprove while Sirius would only encourage further exploration. As he prepared for bed that night, Harry felt more at home at Hogwarts than he had yet. He had friends who valued him for himself, professors who saw his potential without fearing it, and now, a place on the Quidditch team where he could connect with his father's legacy. The label that had defined him for 7 years, the most dangerous wizard alive, was gradually fading, replaced by new identities: Gryffindor, student, friend, seeker. Not erased completely, his unusual power and control requirements remained acknowledged parts of his reality, but no longer the first or only thing people saw when they looked at him. It wasn't perfect. Certain Slytherins still made snide comments about his special accommodations. Some younger students still eyed him nervously in corridors. Ministry officials would still conduct their quarterly evaluations. But for the first time since that stormy night at Privet Drive, Harry felt like he was charting his own course rather than following a path determined by one accidental magical outburst. As he drifted toward sleep, Harry thought about choices, the Sorting Hat's observation that his preferences mattered, his decision to befriend Hermione and Neville rather than Malfoy, McGonagall's choice to see his flying as talent rather than risk. Perhaps that was the most important lesson so far: regardless of power or prophecy, dangerous reputation or famous scar, the choices he made would ultimately define him more than the magic he possessed. And Harry chose to be more than a label. He chose to be himself. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.